The call came in at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late October. Special Agent Marcus Rivera had been sleeping fitfully in his Queens apartment when his phone buzzed violently against the nightstand. 23 years with the FBI's New York field office had trained him to answer immediately, no matter the hour. "Rivera," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Marcus, it's Director Holbrook. We need you at the Canal Street station, now." The urgency in Holbrook's voice snapped Rivera fully awake. "What's the situation?" "MTA workers found something. Can't discuss it over the phone. Bring your underground kit." The line went dead. Rivera was already pulling on his clothes, his mind racing through possibilities. The underground kit meant confined spaces, possibly hazardous materials. Canal Street Station meant the heart of Manhattan's subway system, where multiple lines intersected in a maze of tunnels that had been built and rebuilt over more than a century. The drive from Queens took 35 minutes, even with his emergency lights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The streets of Manhattan were never truly empty, but at this hour they came close. Rivera parked behind a cluster of NYPD vehicles and FBI vans near the station entrance. Yellow tape blocked the subway stairs, and uniformed officers stood guard, turning away the few early morning commuters who approached. Director Patricia Holbrook stood near a mobile command unit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun despite the early hour. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. "Marcus," she said as he approached, "thanks for coming quickly. What do we have?" She handed him a tablet showing grainy security footage. Maintenance crew was doing routine track inspection on the abandoned City Hall loop. "You know it?" Rivera nodded. The City Hall station had been the crown jewel of the original subway system when it opened in 1904, but it had been closed to passengers since 1945. The curved platform made it impossible to use with modern trains, though the tracks were still active for turnarounds. "They found a breach in the wall," Holbrook continued. "Old brickwork had collapsed, revealing a passage that's not on any MTA blueprints." "Prohibition-era smuggling tunnel?" Rivera suggested. "We've found those before." That's what they thought. They sent someone in to assess structural damage. She swiped to the next image on the tablet. This is what they found. Rivera studied the image. It showed a vast underground chamber, far larger than any smuggling tunnel. The walls were lined with what appeared to be makeshift shelving units, and the floor was covered with dozens of mattresses arranged in neat rows. But it was the items on the shelves that made his stomach turn. Hundreds of shoes, all different sizes, all carefully arranged by type. Children's sneakers, women's heels, men's work boots. "My God," he whispered. "It gets worse," Holbrook said. "The worker who took these photos said there was an overwhelming chemical smell. He got out fast and called it in. NYPD responded first, took one look, and called us." "How deep does it go?" "We don't know. The initial chamber appears to be about 60 feet by 40 feet, but there are at least 3 other passages leading off from it. The MTA is pulling every blueprint they have, going back to the original construction, but so far nothing matches this space." Rivera studied the images again, the precision of the arrangement, the methodical organization. This wasn't some homeless encampment or abandoned storage area. Someone had been using this space deliberately, purposefully. "I want a full tactical team," he said. "Hazmat protocols. We need forensics down there immediately, and I want every missing persons file from the last decade pulled and cross-referenced." "Already in motion," Holbrook said. "Agent Martinez is assembling the team now. Marcus, there's one more thing." She showed him another image. This one was of a wall covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all showing people in the subway. The photos appeared to be taken from security cameras, but not official ones. The angles were wrong, taken from positions where no MTA cameras existed. "Someone's been watching," Rivera said. "For a very long time," Holbrook agreed. Within an hour, Rivera was suited up in protective gear, leading a team of 6 agents through the Canal Street station. The normal bustle of the subway was eerily absent, the platforms empty and silent. They descended to the track level, then followed the MTA supervisor through a service door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The abandoned City Hall loop was a different world from the modern subway. The curved platform was still beautiful despite decades of neglect, with colored glass tiles and brass fixtures that belonged to another era. Their flashlights swept across the ghostly space, dust motes dancing in the beams. "This way," the MTA supervisor said, his voice muffled by his respirator. His name was Danny Torino, a 20-year veteran of the transit system who looked genuinely shaken. "The breach is about 100 yards down the tunnel." They walked single file along the tracks, the third rail safely powered down. The tunnel walls were slick with moisture and decades of grime. About halfway to the next station, Torino stopped and pointed his flashlight at a section of wall that looked no different from any other. "There," he said. Now that Rivera knew where to look, he could see it. A section of brickwork that was slightly different in color, newer looking despite attempts to age it. The breach was a ragged hole about 5 feet wide and 6 feet tall, the edges crumbling where someone had broken through from the other side. The bricks fell inward, Agent Martinez observed. She was Rivera's best forensic analyst with an eye for details others missed. This was broken from inside the hidden space, not from the tunnel. Rivera approached the hole carefully, his flashlight penetrating the darkness beyond. The beam illuminated a narrow passage that sloped downward, the walls rough-hewn rock rather than finished brick. A chemical smell wafted out, strong even through his respirator. "Air quality?" he asked. Agent Thompson, carrying environmental monitoring equipment, checked his readings. Elevated methane and some chemical compounds, but not at immediately dangerous levels. Oxygen is a bit low but breathable. Rivera nodded and stepped through the breach, his team following close behind. The passage was tight, forcing them to duck in places. After about 30 feet, it opened into the chamber from the photographs. Seeing it in person was far worse than the images had suggested. The mattresses weren't just arranged in rows. Each one had a number painted on the floor beside it. The shelves of shoes stretched from floor to ceiling, and now Rivera could see that each pair had a small tag attached. He moved closer to read one, M47. Collected March 15th, 19, Platform 6. He was cataloging them, Martinez breathed. "Look at this," Thompson called from across the room. He was standing by a makeshift desk constructed from subway maintenance materials. On it sat several monitors, all dark now, connected to a complex array of cables that snaked up the wall and disappeared into holes drilled in the ceiling. Rivera examined the setup. He tapped into something. Power, maybe surveillance. "These cables are fiber optic," Thompson said. "High-end stuff. This isn't some amateur operation." At the back of the chamber, 3 passages led deeper into the darkness. Rivera chose the leftmost one, gesturing for half his team to follow while the others continued documenting the main room. This passage was different from the entrance. The walls were smoother, older looking. After about 50 feet, they emerged into another chamber, this one naturally formed rather than excavated. The limestone walls wept moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the darkness. The chamber contained more mattresses, but these had restraints attached, zip ties, rope, chain. Clear evidence of captivity, but no victims present. "Nobody here," Martinez said, documenting everything with her camera. but based on the wear patterns and DNA evidence we'll likely find, multiple people were held here for extended periods. Rivera's radio crackled. "Agent Rivera, this is Agent Kim in the main chamber. You need to see what we found." They made their way back to find Kim, standing by the desk, holding a leather journal. "It was in a hidden compartment," she explained. "It's detailed." Rivera took the journal, opening it carefully with gloved hands. The first page was dated 8 years ago. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost mechanical in its consistency. Day 1 found the perfect space. The city built over it, forgot it existed. Like so many things, like so many people. They travel above, never knowing what's beneath. I will document them all. Every lost soul, every forgotten face. He flipped through pages, lists of names, descriptions, dates, sketches of faces, maps of tunnel systems that shouldn't exist, and throughout a recurring phrase, "They walk above, but they belong below." "Sir," Thompson called urgently, "we've got movement on the monitors." Rivera rushed over to see Thompson had managed to power up one of the screens. It showed a grainy feed from what looked like a subway platform, but not one Rivera recognized. The angle was wrong, shot from somewhere near the track level. As they watched, a figure moved across the frame. Someone in MTA maintenance gear, but something about their movement was off. Too careful, too aware. "Where is this?" Rivera demanded. Thompson was checking connections. "The cable runs east from here. Based on the direction and distance, this could be anywhere from Union Square to Brooklyn Bridge Station. Or anywhere in between," Martinez added. "There could be dozens of access points we don't know about." Rivera's radio crackled again. This time it was Director Holbrook. "Marcus, we've got a problem. I'm sending you something now." Rivera's phone buzzed with an incoming file. It was a missing persons report, filed just 6 hours ago. A Columbia University student named Jennifer Walsh hadn't returned to her dorm after a late-night study session. The last confirmed sighting was security footage of her entering the 116th Street subway station at 11:47 p.m. "Check the journal," Holbrook said. "Last entry." Rivera flipped to the most recent pages. Yesterday's date. The entry was different from the others, more hurried, less precise. "She's perfect. JW red coat, black boots, studies at the library until late, takes the 1 train. Tonight, she joins the collection." Below was a detailed sketch of a young woman's face. Even in pencil, the resemblance to Jennifer Walsh's photo was unmistakable. "He's got her," Rivera said. "Or he's planning to—" "There's more," Holbrook said. "We ran the partial facial recognition from the security footage you found. Got a hit on an MTA employee database. Michael Brennan, hired 6 years ago as overnight maintenance. His background check was clean, but the employment history before MTA is fabricated. The addresses don't exist. The references are disconnected numbers. How did he pass the screening? Inside help, maybe, or he's just that good at creating false identities. Marcus, we need to find him fast." Rivera was already moving, his team following. "We need to search these other passages. If she's down here, she might still be alive." The middle passage led to another chamber, this one filled with filing cabinets. Rivera pulled. One open. It was full of wallets, ID cards, cell phones, all meticulously labeled and organized by date. Another cabinet contained clothing, each item in a sealed plastic bag with a tag indicating when and where it was collected. Personal effects of dozens of victims, cataloged like evidence in some twisted investigation. The right passage was the longest, winding deeper underground. The air grew colder as they descended, and Rivera could hear the distant rumble of trains above. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a vast natural cavern. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and the beam of his flashlight couldn't find the far wall. But they could hear something, a soft whimpering, barely audible over the drip of water. "Jennifer?" Rivera called out. "Jennifer Walsh? FBI. We're here to help." The whimpering stopped, replaced by a muffled screaming. Rivera and his team rushed toward the sound, their lights sweeping the cavern. They found her in a natural alcove, bound with zip ties and gagged with a duct tape. She was alive, terrified, but apparently unharmed physically. Martinez cut her free while Rivera radioed for medical support. Jennifer collapsed against Martinez, sobbing uncontrollably. "You're safe now," Martinez assured her. "We've got you." He said no one ever finds this place, Jennifer managed between sobs. "He said I was going to be part of his collection, that I was number 200. "Did you see him?" Rivera asked gently. "Can you describe him?" Jennifer nodded. Tall, maybe 6 feet, thin, brown hair but graying. He had these eyes, they were so empty, like looking into nothing. He wore an MTA uniform, but underneath, she shuddered. Underneath, he was wearing someone else's clothes. A suit. He said it belonged to someone who wouldn't need it anymore. Rivera's radio crackled with urgent reports. Teams were finding more passages, more chambers. The network extended far beyond what they'd initially discovered. Some tunnels connected to active subway lines, others to abandoned stations, and some seemed to predate the subway system entirely. "It's like a whole city down here," one agent reported. "We found what looks like living quarters. Recent food, still warm coffee. He must have just left." "Set up a perimeter," Rivera ordered. "Every subway entrance from Canal to 14th Street. He's got a surface somewhere." But even as he gave the orders, Rivera knew the chances of catching Brennan were slim. The man knew these tunnels better than anyone, had been living in them, expanding them, for years. He could be anywhere in the vast underground network that stretched beneath Manhattan. As they escorted Jennifer to the surface, Rivera looked back at the breach in the tunnel wall. In the 8 years Brennan had been operating down here, how many people had vanished into his underground kingdom? They'd found evidence of at least 200 victims based on his numbering system. But how many had there really been? The thought that chilled him most was how easily Brennan had hidden in plain sight, wearing an MTA uniform, walking among thousands of commuters every day, selecting his victims with careful deliberation. How many times had Rivera himself passed the man in a subway station, never knowing? As they emerged into the pre-dawn light of Canal Street, Rivera saw the massive response that had assembled. FBI, NYPD, MTA security, all preparing for what would be the largest underground search in the city's history. But looking at the subway grates that dotted the street, each one a potential access point to the world below, Rivera wondered if they'd ever truly map all of Brennan's domain. The city above would wake soon, millions of people beginning their day, descending into the subway for their morning commute. They would stand on platforms and ride in trains, never knowing about the parallel world that existed just beyond the tunnel walls, where a predator had built his own twisted museum of the lost and forgotten. The subway system reopened at 7:15 a.m. as scheduled, despite Rivera's protests. The platforms filled with commuters, none aware that FBI agents were scattered among them, watching for any sign of Michael Brennan. Rivera had positioned himself at Union Square, one of the system's busiest hubs, reasoning that Brennan might use the crowds as cover. His earpiece crackled constantly with updates from teams throughout the city. They'd found 12 more chambers overnight, each more disturbing than the last. One contained nothing but children's toys, hundreds of them. all with tags indicating dates and locations. Another held filing cabinets full of detailed notes on thousands of commuters, their routines, their habits, which train cars they preferred. "Rivera, this is Martinez," came through his earpiece. "We've found something in the financial records." Brennan was paying rent on 14 different storage units across the 5 boroughs, all under variations of false names. "Get teams to each one," Rivera ordered, his eyes scanning the platform crowd. "Already en route. But Marcus, there's more. We tracked the payments. He was using MTA's own payment system, hiding the transactions in maintenance supply orders. Someone in accounting had to be helping him." Rivera felt his jaw tighten. The corruption ran deeper than just one man. Pull all accounting records for the last 8 years. Every transaction, every approval. Someone signed off on those payments. A commotion near the platform edge caught his attention. A maintenance worker had emerged from a service door, but something about his movement was wrong. Too hurried, too nervous. Rivera started moving through the crowd, keeping his target in sight. The man was the right height, the right build, but his face was obscured by a cap pulled low. He was carrying a large duffel bag that seemed heavily weighted. Rivera's hand moved to his service weapon as he closed the distance. "Brennan!" he called out. The man froze, then bolted toward the exit. Rivera gave chase, pushing through the morning commuters. "FBI! Everyone down!" The crowd scattered in panic. The suspect reached the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Rivera followed, his legs burning as he raced up to street level. The man burst out onto 14th Street, the duffel bag swinging wildly as he ran. Rivera emerged seconds later, seeing his target weaving through traffic. Cars honked and swerved as the man darted across the intersection. Rivera followed, his badge held high to stop oncoming vehicles. The chase led east toward the East River, the suspect showing surprising stamina for someone carrying such a heavy load. They passed through Stuyvesant Town, early morning joggers jumping aside as the 2 men sprinted past. Finally, near the FDR Drive, the suspect stumbled. The duffel bag flew from his grip, spilling its contents across the sidewalk. Rivera tackled him before he could recover, driving him to the ground. "Michael Brennan, you're under arrest for—" The man turned his face toward Rivera, and Rivera's words died in his throat. It wasn't Brennan. The maintenance worker was younger, maybe 30, with terrified eyes and a face Rivera didn't recognize. "Please," the man gasped. "He made me do it. He said he'd hurt my family if I didn't." "Who?" Rivera demanded. "Who made you?" "The keeper. That's what he calls himself. He has my wife, my daughter. Said I had to move his things or he'd add them to his collection." Rivera looked at the spilled contents of the duffel bag. Videotapes, hundreds of them, each labeled with dates going back years. His blood ran cold as he realized what he was looking at. Brennan's surveillance archive. "Where is he?" Rivera pressed. "Where's the keeper?" "I don't know. He contacts me through the MTA message system, leaves instructions at specific locations. I've never seen his face." Rivera cuffed the man and called for backup, then examined the tapes more closely. The labels were detailed. Platform 4, October 2018, selection phase, and Chamber 7, March 2020 processing. His phone rang. Director Holbrook's voice was tense. "Marcus, we've found evidence in the storage units." "What kind of evidence?" "The first storage unit in Queens. Items belonging to missing persons going back 15 years. Personal effects, identification, clothing. All cataloged with the same numbering system." Rivera's mind raced. Brennan had been at this far longer than they'd thought. He's been building his collection for over a decade. It gets worse. We found documentation in the storage unit. Brennan wasn't working alone. There's a whole network, Marcus. At least 6 other people, all MTA employees, all helping him. They called themselves the Underground Railroad, but instead of freeing people, they were collecting them, Rivera finished. Get me those names, every single one. The man Rivera had arrested, Thomas Garrett, according to his MTA ID, was taken away in a patrol car, still insisting he was a victim, not an accomplice. Rivera believed him. The fear in his eyes was too real, too raw. Back at the Federal Building, Rivera stood before a massive board covered with photos, maps, and string connecting various points. The scope of Brennan's operation was staggering. 15 years of systematic predation, enabled by a network of corrupted or coerced MTA employees. Agent Kim approached with a tablet. We've identified 4 of the 6 accomplices. 2 have been arrested. Both claim Brennan threatened their families. 1 disappeared 3 months ago. The 4th is Linda Patterson, an MTA dispatcher who's been with the agency for 15 years. Bring her in, Rivera ordered. Already done. She's in interrogation room 3, and Marcus, she's talking. Says Brennan has something on all of them, different for each person. Blackmail, threats. Some he actually convinced to believe in what he was doing. Rivera entered the interrogation room to find a middle-aged woman with graying hair and trembling hands. Linda Patterson looked like she hadn't slept in days. Miss Patterson, Rivera began, sitting across from her. We know you helped Michael Brennan. We know about the tunnels, the surveillance, all of it. Your cooperation now is the only thing that might help you. Linda's voice was barely a whisper. You don't understand. He's not what you think. Then tell me what he is. He found something down there, years ago, before he became Brennan. He was someone else then, an urban explorer. He found old tunnels, really old from before the city was even built. Native American, maybe, or something else. Rivera kept his expression neutral despite his skepticism. Go on. He said the tunnels showed him things, the true history of the city, built on forgotten graves, on sacred ground that was defiled. He said the city owed a debt and he was collecting it. 1 person for every soul that was displaced when New York was built. And you believed this? Linda shook her head. I didn't have to believe it. He had photos of me taking bribes from contractors. Small stuff, but enough to end my career, my pension. He said help him or he'd destroy my life. So I helped. I changed schedules so certain maintenance workers would be in certain places. I deleted reports of suspicious activity. I made sure his false employment records stayed buried in the system. Where is he now, Linda? I don't know. I swear I don't, but she hesitated. There's a place he mentioned once. The deepest point in his network. He called it the Foundation. Said it was where New York truly began and where it would end. He was saving it for something special. Saving it for what? For the finale. He always said when they finally found him, he'd retreat to the Foundation. That he had enough supplies there to last months and enough collected souls to complete his work. Rivera left the interrogation room with more questions than answers. The psychological profile they were building of Brennan was complex. Part serial killer, part delusional prophet, part methodical planner. The combination made him unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Martinez met him in the hallway. We've found something in the journal. References to tunnel sections that predate the subway by decades. Some of them line up with old city records of collapsed buildings, underground streams that were diverted. He wasn't just using existing tunnels, he was following something older. How much older? Some of these passages... Marcus, according to geological surveys, they're natural formations that have been here for thousands of years. Brennan found them and connected them to the modern tunnel system. Rivera's phone buzzed. Another message from the field teams. They'd found evidence of more victims in the storage units, personal belongings dating back 2 decades. Brennan had been taking people since he was barely out of his teens. The city belongs to the forgotten, Rivera read from one of Brennan's journal entries. We walk above, but we belong below. The phrase sent chills through him. It wasn't just a motto, it was a philosophy, a twisted worldview that justified the kidnapping and imprisonment of hundreds of people. By afternoon, they had a more complete picture of the network. The tunnels extended from the Bronx to Brooklyn, with major hubs beneath Central Park, Times Square, and the financial district. Some sections were modern additions, carefully excavated over years. Others were ancient natural caves that Brennan had discovered and incorporated. The surveillance system was even more extensive than they'd thought. Brennan had installed over 300 cameras throughout the subway system, all feeding back to monitoring stations in his various chambers. He could track anyone who entered the subway, follow them through their entire journey. "Sir," Agent Thompson called from his computer station. "I've been analyzing the camera feeds we recovered. There's a pattern to his victim selection." Rivera looked over Thompson's shoulder at the screen showing data analysis. "Look at this," Thompson continued. "Every victim fit specific criteria. They were all regular commuters who suddenly changed their routine, started a new job, moved to a new apartment, ended a relationship. He was specifically targeting people in transition, people whose disappearance might not be immediately noticed. Vulnerable people, Rivera said. People already disconnected from their normal lives. But there's more. In the last month, the pattern changed. He started taking people more frequently, less carefully. Jennifer Walsh didn't fit his usual profile. She was a stable student with lots of friends. It's like he was accelerating his timeline. Or preparing for something, Rivera said. Linda Patterson's words echoed in his mind. The finale. As evening approached, teams reported in from across the city. Every known tunnel entrance was being watched, but there were too many to guard effectively. The MTA's own records showed over 600 miles of track, 472 stations, and countless maintenance tunnels. Brennan could be anywhere. Rivera stood in the mobile command center staring at the map of Manhattan with all of Brennan's known tunnel access points marked. There were so many. Too many. "We're thinking about this wrong," he said suddenly. "We're trying to find him in his territory. We need to make him come to us." "How?" Holbrook asked. "His collection. It's everything to him. 15 years of work. He won't abandon it." Rivera pointed to the main chamber they'd discovered first. "We announce that we're removing everything tomorrow. Every piece of evidence, every item he collected. Make it public, put it on the news. You want to provoke him? I want to force him to act. He'll either try to stop us or try to save what he can. Either way, he has to surface." Holbrook considered this. "It's risky. If he has other victims down there—" "He does," Rivera said with certainty. Linda Patterson all but confirmed it. "But if we don't force his hand, he could hide down there indefinitely. The tunnel system is too vast, and he knows it better than we ever will." The decision was made. Within an hour, every major news outlet in New York was running the story. FBI to remove evidence from extensive tunnel network beneath Manhattan subway system. Complete evacuation of underground chambers scheduled for dawn. Rivera positioned teams at every known access point, with thermal imaging equipment and motion sensors. If Brennan moved, they'd know. The wait began as darkness fell over the city. Rivera stationed himself at the primary chamber, the one where they'd found Jennifer Walsh. If Brennan was going to make a move, Rivera's instincts told him it would be here, at the heart of his collection. At 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 week from when Jennifer Walsh had entered the subway, the first sensor triggered. Movement in Tunnel Section 7, came the report. Single heat signature moving fast. Then another sensor. Section 4, 2 signatures, and another. Section 12, 3 signatures. Rivera's blood went cold. It wasn't just Brennan. He had others with him, either accomplices or victims forced to help. All teams converge on the main chamber, Rivera ordered. Full tactical alert. Assume multiple subjects, potentially dangerous. They entered the tunnels in force, 20 agents in full tactical gear. The darkness seemed deeper than before, their flashlights barely penetrating the gloom. The sound of dripping water echoed eerily, mixing with the distant rumble of late-night trains. As they approached the main chamber, Rivera heard something that made him raise his fist, stopping the team. Voices. Multiple voices, all speaking in unison. The city belongs to the forgotten. We walk above, but we belong below. Rivera signaled his team to spread out, surrounding the chamber entrance. On his mark, they burst in, weapons raised, flashlights blazing. The scene that greeted them defied easy explanation. The chamber was full of people, at least 30 of them, all dressed in mismatched clothing. They stood in a circle around a figure in the center, all chanting the same phrase over and over. The central figure turned toward Rivera, and finally he was face to face with Michael Brennan. Brennan was younger than his employment photo suggested, maybe early 40s, with hollow cheeks and eyes that reflected nothing. No fear, no surprise, no emotion at all. "Agent Rivera," Brennan said, his voice cultured, nothing like the working-class accent they'd expected. "I've been watching you. You're very thorough." "Michael Brennan, you're under arrest," Rivera said, keeping his weapon trained on him. Brennan smiled, an expression that didn't reach his dead eyes. "Michael Brennan was just a name, a costume I wore to move in your world. Down here, I am the keeper, and these," he gestured to the people around him, "are the kept." Rivera looked closer at the circle of people. Some he recognized from missing persons files. Others looked like they'd been down here much longer, their clothes deteriorated, their faces pale and gaunt. "Let them go," Rivera demanded. "Let them go?" Brennan laughed. "They don't want to go. Tell him." One of the people in the circle stepped forward. Rivera recognized him from a missing persons report. David Park, missing for 2 weeks. "The city belongs to the forgotten," David said in a monotone voice. "We walk above, but we belong below." "You've brainwashed them," Rivera said. "I've educated them, shown them the truth about this city, built on bones and lies. Every skyscraper is a tombstone, every subway tunnel a mass grave. The original inhabitants of this land were pushed aside, forgotten. These people understand that now. You're sick. You need help." Brennan's expression hardened. "The sick ones are up there, cramming into metal tubes, living in boxes stacked on top of each other, pretending they're not walking on the graves of the displaced. I'm not sick, Agent Rivera. I'm the cure." Rivera noticed movement among the circle. Some of the people were swaying, as if in a trance. Others had their eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. These weren't just victims. They were converts to Brennan's twisted philosophy. "How many?" Rivera asked. "How many people have you taken?" "Taken? I've saved them. 237 souls, freed from the lie of the surface world. Some couldn't accept the truth and had to be released. But most understood eventually. The city owes a debt, and we are the payment. Where are the others? the ones not here. Safe, hidden, waiting. Brennan's smile widened. You found one network, Agent Rivera. But I've been building for 15 years. Do you really think I'd keep everything in one place? The standoff stretched taut. Rivera could see his team's tension, fingers on triggers, waiting for his command. But with 30 potential victims in the room, any action could lead to disaster. You want to shoot me, Brennan said. But if you do, they'll scatter. 30 people running through tunnels only they know. How many will you lose in the darkness? How many will disappear forever into the depths? He was right, and Rivera knew it. They needed to end this without violence, without chaos. What do you want, Brennan? I want you to understand. Come with me, Agent Rivera. Let me show you the foundation. Let me show you what this city really is. Then you can decide if I'm the monster or if I'm the only one who sees clearly. It was obviously a trap, but Rivera saw no other option. If there were more victims hidden in the tunnels, he needed to find them. Just me, Rivera said. I come with you. You let these people go. Number. They stay. They're part of this now. But you can come. You can see. And then you can decide if you want to arrest me or join me. Rivera looked at his team. Stand down. Nobody moves until I get back. Sir, you can't. Martinez started. That's an order. Rivera cut her off. He holstered his weapon and stepped toward Brennan. Show me. Brennan led Rivera through a passage different from the others. Older. The walls weren't carved or built. They were natural rock, worn smooth by centuries of water flow. The air grew colder as they descended, and Rivera could hear something in the distance, a sound like wind but deeper, more resonant. You feel it, don't you? Brennan said without turning around. The breathing of the city. The real city, not the cancer that grew on top of it. They walked for what felt like miles, always descending. Rivera tried to maintain his sense of direction, but the passages twisted and turned until he was completely disoriented. His radio had lost signal long ago, and he knew his team couldn't track him this deep. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern, so large Rivera's flashlight couldn't find the far wall or ceiling. The space was filled with evidence of long-term habitation, makeshift shelters, water collection systems, even what appeared to be underground gardens growing beneath UV lights. The foundation, Brennan said reverently. This was here before the Dutch, before the British, before your America. The Lenape people knew about it, avoided it, said it was a place where the earth remembered everything that had been taken from it. Rivera saw movement in the shadows. More people, dozens of them, emerging from hidden spaces. They moved with the same eerie synchronization as the group above, but these individuals looked different. Healthier, more alert, as if they'd adapted to life underground. 237, Rivera said. They're all here? Most. Some chose to return to the surface after their education was complete. They walk above now, but they remember the truth. They remember where they belong. You're saying you let people go? Those who truly understood, yes. They become my eyes above, watching, waiting, selecting others who might be ready for the truth. Rivera's mind raced. If Brennan was telling the truth, there were dozens of people walking around New York who had been indoctrinated into his cult, potentially recruiting others. The missing persons reports, Rivera said. Some of them came back, didn't they? Claimed amnesia, couldn't explain where they'd been. 17 returned, Brennan confirmed. The authorities were so happy to have them back they didn't ask too many questions. Trauma, they said, psychological displacement. They prescribed medication, therapy. But the returned ones knew the truth. They'd seen what lies beneath, and they could never forget. Brennan led Rivera to a natural platform overlooking the cavern. From there, Rivera could see the full scope of the underground community. It was organized, structured. Different areas for different purposes. Sleeping quarters, common areas, even what looked like a school where children were being taught. Children? Rivera's voice was sharp. You have children down here? Born here, Brennan said. Second generation of the truly forgotten. They've never known the lies of the surface. They're pure, untainted by the false history you teach above. Rivera felt sick. This wasn't just kidnapping and false imprisonment. It was the creation of an entire underground society, hidden beneath New York for over a decade. This ends now, Brennan. All of it. Does it? You have, 20 agents above? I have 200 people who believe in our cause. And more importantly, I have knowledge of every tunnel, every passage, every hidden space beneath this city. You could bring 1,000 agents down here and never find us all. We'll seal the tunnels, every entrance. Brennan laughed. Do you know how many entrances there are? Not just subway access points, but old sewer connections, utility tunnels, basement walls that were never properly sealed. I've spent 15 years mapping them all. The city above is Swiss cheese, Agent Rivera, full of holes. A woman approached them, carrying a worn leather journal. She was perhaps 40, with the same pale complexion as the others, but with an air of authority. This is Sarah, Brennan introduced. She was one of my first saved souls. Missing person number 12. She chose to stay to help build our community. Sarah studied Rivera with intelligent eyes. Agent Rivera, Michael has told us about you, about your investigation. You're very dedicated to maintaining the lies. I'm dedicated to the law, to bringing missing people home. Home? Sarah gestured to the cavern. This is home. Above is just where we were trapped before we understood the truth. Rivera noticed something disturbing. Sarah's missing persons file was from 2009. She'd been a Wall Street analyst, reported missing by her family after not showing up for work. Yet here she was, apparently thriving in this underground world. Your family thinks you're dead, Rivera told her. My family never knew me. They knew the person I pretended to be, the role I played in their false world. Here, I'm real. Here, I matter. Brennan was watching Rivera's reactions carefully. You're beginning to understand, aren't you? This isn't about me controlling them. It's about them choosing to escape the control of the surface world. You manipulated them, kidnapped them. I showed them an alternative. Some couldn't handle it, true, but most, when they saw the truth of what this city is built on, chose to stay. Rivera heard a sound. Footsteps, many of them, approaching from multiple tunnels. His hand went to his weapon. Relax, Brennan said. It's time for the gathering. Every night at midnight we come together. We remember why we're here. The cavern began filling with people. Men, women, even children, all moving with purpose toward a central area. They formed concentric circles just like the group above, but this was larger, more organized. 237, Brennan said again. Plus the 17 above, plus the dozens who visit but maintain their surface lives. We're not a cult, Agent Rivera. We're a civilization. The first true civilization of New York, built on truth instead of lies. The gathering began to speak in unison. Not the chant from before, but something else. Names. They were reciting names, hundreds of them, in a rhythmic pattern. The names of the displaced, Brennan explained. Every native person pushed off this land. Every slave who died building this city. Every immigrant worked to death in the factories. every forgotten soul whose bones rest beneath the skyscrapers. We remember them all. Rivera had to admit there was something powerful about it. Hundreds of voices, speaking hundreds of names, in this ancient cavern beneath the modern city. But he also saw the reality. People who had been manipulated, isolated, turned into believers in Brennan's twisted vision. "I need to return to the surface," Rivera said. "My team will come looking if I don't." "Of course. But first, one more thing." Brennan led him to another section of the cavern, where the walls were covered in photographs, documents, maps. My research. 15 years of uncovering the true history of New York. Rivera examined the documents. They were real. Historical records, archaeological surveys, newspaper clippings from centuries past. Brennan hadn't fabricated his narrative from nothing. He'd built it on actual history, twisted to serve his purpose. The mass graves from the 1800s cholera outbreaks. Brennan pointed to one section. Never properly documented. The city just built over them. The African burial ground. They found part of it, but most is still under office buildings. The 5 Point slum, where thousands died in poverty. Now it's courthouses and government buildings. This is all historical fact, Rivera admitted. But it doesn't justify what you're doing, doesn't it? The city was built on suffering, and that suffering was forgotten. We're just choosing to remember, to honor the forgotten by becoming forgotten ourselves. Rivera noticed something else on the wall. Recent photographs of FBI agents, including himself. His home address, his daily routine. "You've been watching us." "Know your enemy. Though I don't consider you an enemy, Agent Rivera. You're just doing your job, protecting the system you believe in. But that system is built on lies. The system gives people justice, law, order. The system gives people the illusion of those things while perpetuating the very inequalities that created the forgotten in the first place." Before Rivera could respond, someone ran into the chamber. One of the people from the circle above, panicked and out of breath. "Keeper, the surface dwellers, they're sealing the main entrance. Concrete, steel barriers, they're trapping us." Brennan's calm finally cracked. He grabbed Rivera's arm. "You lied. You said they'd wait." "I said they'd stand down. I didn't say for how long." Rivera pulled free. "It's over, Brennan. Surrender now, and maybe we can work out something for these people." Brennan's face contorted with rage, then smoothed back into that eerie calm. "Sarah, initiate Protocol 7. Sarah nodded and disappeared into one of the tunnels. Within moments, alarms began sounding. Not electronic, but bells, drums, human voices calling out warnings. "Protocol 7, Rivera demanded. "Dispersion. If the main community is threatened, we scatter. 237 people disappearing into tunnels all over New York. Your 20 agents above? They might catch a few, but most will vanish into the city, blend back into the surface world, and wait. Wait for what? For the signal to rebuild. This isn't the first time the forgotten have had to hide, Agent Rivera. The Lenape did it. The escaped slaves did it. The immigrants did it. And now we do it." The cavern erupted in organized chaos. People grabbed prepared bags, supplies, children. They moved toward different tunnels, each group clearly knowing exactly where to go. "You can't stop them all," Brennan said. "But I'll make you a deal. I'll surrender. Call off the dispersion if you agree to one thing." "What?" "Tell their stories, the real stories. Every person here came because they felt forgotten, invisible, disposable. Promise me you'll make sure they're heard, and I'll end this peacefully." Rivera watched the evacuation beginning, knowing that once these people scattered into the tunnel system, they'd never find them all. Some would surface, try to return to normal lives. Others would disappear forever into the underground. I can promise they'll be treated fairly, that their stories will be documented, but they have to come willingly. Brennan seemed to consider this. Then he pulled out an old subway conductor's whistle and blew 3 long notes. The evacuation stopped. Everyone turned to look at him. "The agent offers us a choice," Brennan announced, his voice carrying throughout the cavern. "Surface and be heard, or scatter and be forgotten again. Each of you must decide for yourself." For a moment, no one moved. Then Sarah stepped forward. "I'll surface," she said. 15 years is long enough. Maybe it's time the surface world heard what we have to say." Others followed her lead. Not all. Rivera estimated maybe half chose to surface. The others melted back into the tunnels, disappearing into darkness before anyone could stop them. "A compromise," Brennan said. "Some will tell our story, others will preserve it. The forgotten will not be silenced, Agent Rivera, one way or another." Rivera radioed his team, giving them a situation update and requesting medical personnel, social services, and a lot more backup. The logistics of processing over 100 people who'd been living underground for years would be staggering. As they waited for the response teams, Rivera stood with Brennan at the platform, looking out over the cavern that had been home to so many for so long. "Why?" Rivera asked. "Why all of this?" "Because someone had to remember," Brennan said simply. "Someone had to acknowledge that this city, this entire country, is built on forgotten graves. I just took it too far. I see that now, but the forgetting, that has to stop." When the FBI teams arrived, the scene was surreal. Over 100 people emerging from the depths, blinking in the harsh lights, some seeing FBI agents as rescuers, others as invaders. Children who had never known sunlight. Adults who had chosen to disappear from their own lives. Brennan was arrested without resistance. As they led him away, he turned to Rivera one last time. "The ones who scattered," he said, "they're not dangerous. They're just people who choose to remember. Don't hunt them. Let them be the city's conscience, reminding everyone of what lies beneath." Rivera didn't respond, but he knew Brennan was right about one thing. They'd never find everyone who had disappeared into the tunnels that night. Conservative estimates suggested at least 80 people had vanished into the underground, and with the tunnel system as vast as it was, they could stay hidden indefinitely. The aftermath was complicated. Some of the surfaced individuals were reunited with families who had thought them dead. Others had no one to return to. The children born underground presented legal challenges no one had anticipated. And through it all, the story Brennan had told about the forgotten bones beneath the city, about the displaced and erased, proved to be historically accurate. The city had been built on forgotten suffering, and acknowledging that truth became part of the healing process for many of the victims. 6 months had passed since the raid on the foundation, and Agent Marcus Rivera thought the case was closed. The media had called it the Mole People Cult, a sensationalist name that missed the complexity of what had really happened. Michael Brennan was awaiting trial. Over 100 people were in various stages of reintegration therapy, and the main tunnel entrances had been sealed. But Rivera knew the truth was more complicated. He stood in his office at 26 Federal Plaza, looking at a map of Manhattan covered in red pins. Each pin represented a reported sighting of someone from the dispersed group. 83 people had vanished into the tunnels that night, and despite extensive searches, only 12 had been found. His phone rang. It was Detective Patricia Wong from the NYPD. "Rivera, we've got another one. Graffiti in the Canal Street station. Same message." Rivera knew what it would say before Wong told him. "The city belongs to the forgotten. We walk above, but we belong below." It was the 15th such incident in the past month. No vandalism beyond the message, no crimes committed. Just reminders that the forgotten were still there, still watching. Rivera arrived at Canal Street Station to find Wong photographing the graffiti. It was written in chalk, easily removable, positioned where thousands of commuters would see it during the rush hour. "Security footage?" Rivera asked. "Already checked. Person in maintenance uniform, face obscured. They knew exactly where the cameras were, how to avoid facial recognition." "One of the 71 still missing." Wong nodded. "That's what we figure. But here's the interesting part. We've had 3 missing persons cases in the last month where the individuals returned on their own, claiming they'd been in the tunnels. Voluntarily. That's what they say. They heard about Brennan's community, sought it out, spent time underground, then decided to return. No crime committed, no one held against their will." Rivera felt a chill. The community still exists. In some form, smaller, more careful, but still there. Rivera's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Battery Park. Entrance C. Come alone. S. Sarah, the Wall Street analyst who had been Brennan's second in command. She'd been released after psychological evaluation determined she posed no threat, but she disappeared within days. Rivera knew he should report this, bring backup, but something made him go alone. The entrance to Battery Park's underground maintenance area was supposedly sealed, but Rivera found it unlocked. He descended into darkness, his flashlight revealing a familiar sight. Someone had been living here. Recently. Agent Rivera. He spun to find Sarah standing behind him, looking healthier than she had 6 months ago. The underground pallor was gone, replaced by a normal complexion, but her eyes still held that unsettling certainty. "Sarah, you're wanted for questioning." "I know, but I needed to talk to you first, about what's happening, about what's coming." "The graffiti? Not us. Well, not exactly us. The dispersion created something we didn't expect. Independent cells. People who believed in Brennan's message, but not his methods. They're organizing. Organizing for what?" Sarah pulled out a tablet, showing Rivera social media posts, forum discussions, encrypted chat logs. The forgotten are becoming a movement. Not just here, Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit. Every major city built on buried history. People are exploring their own underground spaces, finding their own evidence of the displaced. Rivera scrolled through the posts. Urban explorers finding mass graves under old buildings, historians documenting erased communities, activists organizing to preserve these hidden histories. "This isn't necessarily bad," Rivera said. "If people want to preserve history, some want to preserve it, others want to use it. There's a group in Brooklyn calling themselves the New Forgotten. They're planning something for the anniversary." Anniversary? 1 year since Brennan's arrest. They see him as a prophet, a martyr. They want to make a statement. What kind of statement? Sarah showed him another document, a manifesto posted on a dark web forum. It talked about reclaiming the underground, about forcing the surface to acknowledge the depths. They're planning to occupy multiple subway stations simultaneously, Sarah explained. Not violently, just presence. Hundreds of people appearing from maintenance tunnels, standing silent on platforms during rush hour, holding signs with the names of the forgotten. That's not illegal technically. No, but it's just the beginning. Some of the more extreme cells, they're talking about establishing permanent underground settlements, like what Brennan built, but bigger, more organized. Rivera studied the manifesto. It was well written, persuasive even. It painted Brennan not as a kidnapper, but as a visionary who had been persecuted for revealing uncomfortable truths. "Why are you telling me this?" Rivera asked. "Because I don't want to see Brennan's message corrupted. He went too far, yes. Keeping people against their will was wrong. But the core truth, that this city is built on forgotten suffering, that's real. And it deserves to be acknowledged properly, not through extremism. What do you want me to do? Listen, really listen. The people who went underground, who chose to stay even after Brennan's arrest, they're not crazy. They're people who felt so invisible in the surface world that living in tunnels felt more real than their regular lives." Rivera thought about the interviews he'd conducted with the returned. Many had described similar feelings, that underground they'd felt part of something meaningful for the first time in their lives. "There are still people down there," Sarah continued. "Not kidnapped, not held, just living. They've established small communities in abandoned stations, forgotten tunnels. They're not hurting anyone, they're just choosing to exist outside the system. That's still illegal, trespassing at minimum. Is it worse than being homeless on the surface? At least underground they have shelter, community, purpose." Before Rivera could respond, they heard footsteps. Multiple people approaching from different directions. Rivera's hand went to his weapon. "Relax," Sarah said. "They just want to meet you." From the shadows emerged about a dozen people. Rivera recognized some from the missing persons files. People who had vanished into the tunnels 6 months ago. They looked healthy, clean, nothing like the stereotypical image of tunnel dwellers. One of them, a young man named Marcus, who had been a Columbia graduate student, stepped forward. "Agent Rivera, we wanted you to see that we're not victims. We're not a cult. We're just people who choose to live differently." "You're living in abandoned tunnels," Rivera pointed out. "We're living in spaces the city abandoned. We maintain them, keep them clean, even preserve their history. Did you know there's a pneumatic mail tube station from 1897 that's completely intact? We're documenting it, protecting it from decay." Another person, an older woman, spoke up. "I was homeless before, invisible on the street. Down here I have a home, a family, a purpose. We grow food using hydroponics, purify water, generate our own power. We're not parasites. We're proving another way is possible." Rivera was conflicted. As an FBI agent, he knew he should arrest them all. But as someone who had spent months investigating this case, he understood the complex reality of what they were saying. "Michael Brennan kidnapped people," Rivera said. "He held them against their will." "And he was wrong to do that," Marcus agreed. "But he was right about the history, about the forgotten. We're not continuing his crimes. We're continuing his mission, but ethically." Sarah pulled out a worn journal. "This is Brennan's real research. Not the kidnapping plans, but the historical documentation. Locations of mass graves, records of displaced communities, evidence of how the city literally buried its past. We want to preserve this, make it public, but properly. Why not just publish it normally? Because no one would care. Another academic paper, another museum exhibit that people walk past. But if it comes from us, from the underground, people pay attention. The message and the messenger matter." Rivera heard his radio crackle. His team was looking for him. He had to make a decision. "I can't endorse this," he said. "But I also can't stop you all. There are too many tunnels, too many of you, and frankly, if you're not committing crimes—" "We're not," Sarah assured him. "We're just remembering what the city wants to forget." Rivera turned to leave, then stopped. "The new forgotten. The ones planning the station, occupation. Don't let that happen. It'll only lead to arrests, violence, the message getting lost." Marcus nodded. "We're trying to talk them out of it. Most of us want peaceful coexistence, not confrontation." As Rivera returned to the surface, he felt the weight of what he'd learned. The case wasn't closed. It had evolved into something larger, more complex. A social movement born in darkness, spreading through the abandoned spaces of America's cities. Back in his office, Rivera wrote his report carefully. He documented the graffiti, the continued presence of people in the tunnels, the potential for future incidents. But he also included context, the historical accuracy of Brennan's research, the voluntary nature of the current underground communities, the distinction between the criminal actions of the past and the civil disobedience of the present. Director Holbrook read his report with a frown. "You're saying we should just let them be? I'm saying we can't stop them without massive resources we don't have, for people who are essentially urban camping. Our priority should be preventing violence and actual crimes, not chasing shadows through tunnels." And Brennan? Brennan committed real crimes: kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy. He'll be convicted. But his followers, they're something different. 2 weeks later, on the anniversary of Brennan's arrest, something remarkable happened. Not the station occupation the extremists had planned. Sarah and her group had successfully talked them down. Instead, throughout New York City, small brass plaques appeared overnight. Attached to buildings, embedded in sidewalks, placed in parks. Each plaque bore a name and a date. The names of the forgotten, slaves who had built Wall Street, immigrants who had died in factory fires, Native Americans whose villages had been destroyed. Thousands of plaques, each one marking a spot where someone had been erased from history. The city tried to remove them at first, but public opinion turned. Historians confirmed the accuracy of the names and dates. Community groups adopted the plaques, maintaining them, adding flowers on anniversaries. Rivera stood at one of these plaques, near where his father had grown up in the Bronx. It bore the name of a Puerto Rican family that had been displaced by Robert Moses's urban renewal. His father might have known them, might have played with their children. His phone buzzed, another unknown number. "Thank you," the text read, "for listening, for understanding. The work continues, but peacefully now. The forgotten are remembered. The underground." Rivera deleted the text and walked away. The case was closed officially. Michael Brennan would spend the rest of his life in prison. The kidnapped victims were free and receiving help. But underground, in the spaces the city had forgotten, a new community thrived. Not victims, not cult members, but people who had chosen to step outside the system, to live in the margins, to remember what others wanted to forget. They walked above, like everyone else, but they belonged below, in the spaces between the official city and its buried past. And perhaps, Rivera thought, that wasn't entirely wrong. The tunnels beneath New York City stretched for hundreds of miles, filled with history, tragedy, and now, new life. The forgotten had not been silenced. They had found their voice, their place, their purpose. And in the darkness below the city that never sleeps, they kept watch, ensuring that the bones and stories buried beneath the skyscrapers would never be forgotten again. The pattern wasn't obvious at first. It took a determined city housing inspector named Maria Gonzalez 3 months of digging through property records to notice that something was terribly wrong with New York City's abandoned buildings. On a cold November morning, she walked into the FBI's New York field office with a cardboard box full of documents and a theory that would launch one of the strangest investigations in the Bureau's history. Special Agent James Sullivan had been reviewing financial crime reports when Maria was escorted to his desk. Sullivan was a 15-year veteran of white-collar crime investigations, used to dealing with embezzlement and fraud, not conspiracy theories from city employees. But something in Maria's eyes, a mixture of fear and determination, made him listen. 47 buildings, Maria said, spreading property deeds across Sullivan's desk. All abandoned, all in different boroughs, all purchased between 2016 and 2023, and they're all owned by the same person. Sullivan examined the deeds. The name on each was different. Various LLCs, holding companies, trusts. These aren't the same owner, he said. Look closer, Maria insisted. She pulled out a highlighted spreadsheet. I traced the corporate structures. Shell companies within shell companies, foreign trusts, anonymous partnerships. But they all lead back to one name. Franklin Voss. The name meant nothing to Sullivan. A quick search in the FBI database returned no results. No criminal record, no financial investigations, no flags of any kind. Who is Franklin Voss? Sullivan asked. That's just it, Maria said. As far as I can tell, he doesn't exist. No social security number, no birth certificate, no death certificate. The only proof Franklin Voss ever existed is his signature on these documents. Sullivan looked at the signatures. They were all identical, written in an old-fashioned cursive style that looked more at home in the 1950s than the 2020s. Why do you think this is FBI jurisdiction? Sullivan asked. Suspicious property ownership isn't necessarily federal. Maria pulled out another set of documents, missing persons reports. Because of these. In the last 7 years, 38 people have gone missing within 2 blocks of these buildings. That's a statistical impossibility unless something connects them. Now she had Sullivan's full attention. He spread the missing persons reports across his desk, comparing them to the property locations. The correlation was undeniable. Have the buildings been searched? By local police, yes, they're all empty. No squatters, no signs of habitation. Most don't even have functioning utilities, they're just empty. Sullivan made a decision. Leave everything with me. I'll look into it. Maria stood to leave, then turned back. Agent Sullivan? Be careful. I've been investigating this for 3 months, and last week someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, but all my personal files were rearranged, like someone was cataloging my life. After Maria left, Sullivan assembled a small team. Agent Rachel Price from Organized Crime, Agent Derek Thompson from Missing Persons, and Agent Nina Petrova from Financial Crimes. Together, they began unraveling the mystery of Franklin Voss. The first building they visited was in Brooklyn, a 6-story brownstone on Prospect Avenue that had been beautiful once, but now stood like a rotting tooth in an otherwise gentrified neighborhood. The front door was secured with a modern electronic lock that seemed incongruous with the building's decay. High-tech security for an abandoned building, Price observed. Thompson ran a scanner over the lock. It's connected to something. Wireless signal, but encrypted. They entered using a universal override from the city. The smell hit them immediately. Not decay or mold, but something chemical, astringent. Like a hospital, but wrong somehow. The first floor was empty as reported. Dust-covered floors, peeling wallpaper, no furniture. But Sullivan noticed something odd about the dust patterns. Paths through it, recently made, leading to seemingly random spots on the walls. Someone's been here, he said, recently and repeatedly. They moved through the building methodically. Each floor was the same, empty, decaying, but with those strange paths through the dust. It wasn't until they reached the basement that they found the first anomaly. The basement had been completely renovated. Modern walls, industrial lighting, climate control systems. It looked like a medical facility. Examination tables, monitoring equipment, filing cabinets full of medical records. What the hell were they doing down here? Price whispered. Sullivan examined the medical records. Each file contained detailed medical histories, psychological evaluations, even DNA test results. The names matched some of the missing persons reports Maria had provided. They were studying them, Thompson said, reading over Sullivan's shoulder. Look at these notes: behavioral patterns, family histories, genetic markers. Someone was selecting these people for specific characteristics. But for what purpose? Petrova had been examining the financial records left in one of the filing cabinets. This is sophisticated, she said. Whoever set this up was spending millions. Medical equipment, personnel, transportation. These aren't random kidnappings. This is an organized operation. Sullivan's phone rang. It was Director Holbrook. James, we've got a situation. One of the missing persons from your list just walked into a police station in Queens. David Park, missing for 6 months. But James, he claims he doesn't remember anything. Complete amnesia. They rushed to the Queens precinct where David Park was being held. The man looked healthy, well-fed, but confused. When Sullivan tried to question him, Park could only provide fragments of memory. I remember a white room, Park said slowly. Doctors, I think? They said they were helping me. There were others there, other patients. We were all sick, they said. But I don't remember being sick. Do you remember how you got there? I remember leaving work one day then. Nothing until I woke up on a park bench this morning. Sullivan showed him photos of the Brooklyn building. Park's eyes widened slightly. I've been there. I don't remember when or why, but I recognize it. Over the next 3 days, 4 more missing persons reappeared, all with the same story: complete amnesia, vague memories of medical treatment, no explanation for their months-long disappearance. Medical examinations showed they were all in perfect health, better than before they disappeared. But brain scans revealed something disturbing: signs of extensive neurological intervention. Someone had been manipulating their memories. Sullivan's team expanded their investigation to the other buildings. Each one had a renovated basement, each set up as some kind of medical facility. They found more records, more evidence of careful selection and study of victims. Look at this, Petrova said, showing Sullivan a financial document. Payments to legitimate medical professionals, neurosurgeons, psychiatrists, specialists in memory and cognitive function. They were hiring real doctors. For what? Illegal medical experiments? Maybe, or maybe something else. Look at the selection criteria for the victims. All had specific psychological profiles: depression, PTSD, severe anxiety disorders. What if someone was trying to fix them? Sullivan felt a chill. Forced medical treatment? It's still kidnapping, still illegal. His phone rang. Unknown number. Agent Sullivan, a cultured voice said. I understand you've found my facilities. Who is this? Someone who's been trying to help people that society has abandoned. The missing persons you're investigating, they were all suffering, all forgotten by the system. I gave them a second chance. You kidnapped them. I saved them. Every one of them was on a path to self-destruction. Suicide risks, addiction problems, severe mental illness. The system failed them, so I stepped in. Where are the others? We've only found 5. The successful ones have been released with new identities, new lives, free from the pain that was destroying them. The others, not every treatment works. You're saying some died? I'm saying medicine involves risk, but the alternative for these people was certain death or continued suffering. Who are you, Franklin Voss? The man laughed. Franklin Voss is a construct, a name to hold property and protect the real work. I'm Dr. Marcus Thornton, formerly of Mount Sinai's neurology department. I lost my license for proposing radical treatments for mental illness, so I continued my work privately. This is illegal, Dr. Thornton. You can't kidnap people and experiment on them, regardless of your intentions. Can't I? Check your missing persons again, Agent Sullivan. How many of them had families actively looking? How many were reported missing by employers who just wanted to fill their position? These were invisible people, forgotten people. I made them visible again. The line went dead. Sullivan immediately put out a BOLO for doctor. Marcus Thornton, but the name led nowhere. No current address, no photos on file, nothing but old academic papers on experimental neurology. They found Thornton's main facility in Building 31, a former department store in Manhattan. The basement had been converted into a full medical center. Operating rooms, recovery wards, even a psychiatric unit. But it was empty, hastily evacuated. What they did find were detailed records of the treatments. Memory suppression therapy to remove traumatic experiences. Behavioral conditioning to eliminate addictive tendencies. Neurological rewiring to correct chemical imbalances. All of it experimental. None of it approved by any medical board. He was playing God, Price said, reading through the files. Deciding who deserved to be fixed and how. They also found evidence of the failures. Death certificates for 12 individuals, all attributed to complications during treatment. The bodies had been cremated. Families told they had died of natural causes if they had families at all. This is murder, Sullivan said. 12 counts at minimum. But finding Thornton proved impossible. The man was a ghost, moving through a network of associates and hidden facilities. More missing persons reappeared over the following weeks, all with the same amnesia, all showing signs of neurological intervention. Some seemed genuinely better. Former addicts who no longer craved drugs, depression sufferers who reported feeling happiness for the first time in years. But at what cost? They had no memory of months or years of their lives, no ability to consent to what had been done to them. The investigation revealed the full scope of the Thorntons' network. The 47 buildings were just the tip of the iceberg. He had contacts in hospitals, homeless shelters, psychiatric facilities, people who identified potential patients and referred them to his program. 3 weeks after Sullivan's team discovered Thornton's network, the case took a darker turn. A body was found in Central Park. Robert Henley, one of the missing persons who had never reappeared. The autopsy revealed extensive surgical scars and evidence of repeated neurological procedures. He had died from a massive brain hemorrhage, likely caused by the experimental treatments. Dr. Lisa Chang, the medical examiner, had called Sullivan directly. "You need to see this," she'd said. In the morgue, under harsh fluorescent lights, Henley's body revealed the truth about Thornton's experiments. Multiple surgical sites on his skull, scarring consistent with repeated electrode implantation, and most disturbingly, evidence of experimental brain surgery techniques that hadn't been approved for human use. This wasn't treatment, Chang said. This was systematic experimentation. He was testing procedures, using these people as guinea pigs. Cause of death? Brain hemorrhage caused by tissue damage from repeated procedures. This man endured months of surgical interventions. The pain must have been excruciating. Sullivan's phone rang. It was Agent Price. "We've got another one. Brooklyn Hospital. She's still alive, but barely." The woman was Sarah Mitchell, 28, missing for 4 months. She was conscious but heavily sedated, rambling about the doctor's promises and the white rooms. Her medical scans showed similar surgical interventions to Henley's. "Please," she gasped when she saw Sullivan's FBI badge. "Don't let them take me back. The others, they're still there. Building 31, the deep rooms." "Building 31? We searched it. It was empty." Sarah gripped his arm weakly. "Below the basement, there's another level. That's where he keeps the failures." Before Sullivan could ask more, Sarah's condition deteriorated. Doctors rushed to stabilize her, but the damage to her nervous system was too extensive. She slipped into a coma and never woke up. That night, Sullivan assembled his team for an urgent search of Building 31. They brought ground-penetrating radar and discovered Sarah had been right. There was another level below the basement, hidden behind a false wall. What they found there changed the entire nature of the investigation. The sub-basement was a holding facility, 24 small rooms, each with basic amenities and heavy locks on the doors. In 12 of the rooms, they found people. Missing persons who hadn't been released, hadn't died, but hadn't responded to Thornton's treatments as intended. They were alive, but damaged. Some suffered from severe memory disorders, unable to form new memories or access old ones. Others had developed neurological conditions, tremors, partial paralysis, cognitive impairment. All showed signs of extensive medical intervention. "My God," Price whispered. "He just kept them when the experiments failed." Among the victims was Anthony Valdez, a name Sullivan recognized from the original missing persons list. Valdez had been a small-time drug dealer before disappearing 8 months ago. Now he could barely speak, his words slurred and confused. "The doctor, he said he could fix me," Valdez managed. "Make the voices stop, but they got worse. Everything got worse." "What voices?" "The ones that told me to hurt people. I wanted them gone. He said he could remove them. But now they're all I hear." Sullivan realized the true horror of Thornton's operation. He wasn't just experimenting on people. He was targeting the mentally ill, the addicted, the vulnerable, promising them cures for conditions that legitimate medicine struggled to treat. Emergency medical teams evacuated all 12 victims to various hospitals. Each one told a similar story, recruited by someone who promised revolutionary treatment for their conditions, taken to the White Rooms, subjected to increasingly invasive procedures. The investigation intensified. Sullivan's team discovered that Thornton had accomplices in major hospitals across the city: nurses, orderlies, even some doctors who referred specific patients to his program. They thought they were helping, sending desperate people to someone who offered hope when the system had failed them. One of these accomplices, a psychiatric nurse named Linda Patterson, agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. "Dr. Thornton was brilliant," she said during interrogation. "He published papers on experimental neurology that were groundbreaking. When he lost his license, many of us thought it was unfair. He was just trying to help people everyone else had given up on." "So, you sent patients to him?" "Only the ones with no other options, chronic schizophrenics who didn't respond to medication, addicts who had failed every rehab program, people who were going to die or end up institutionalized anyway." "Without their consent?" Linda's face hardened. "What consent?" "Half of them couldn't legally consent anyway due to their mental states. Their families had abandoned them. The system had no answers. Dr. Thornton offered them a chance. He experimented on them. People died. Subject 23, Thornton's voice narrated as the camera showed a young woman strapped to an operating table. Previous diagnosis: treatment-resistant depression with psychotic features. 3 suicide attempts. Family history of mental illness. Today, we begin the neural pathway reconstruction protocol. Sullivan couldn't watch the actual procedures. They were too disturbing. But the videos revealed Thornton's location: a warehouse in Queens that wasn't on their list of properties. The FBI raid on the warehouse was coordinated with SWAT teams and emergency medical personnel. They found Thornton in a makeshift operating room, in the middle of a procedure on a sedated patient. "Don't move," Sullivan ordered, weapon drawn. Thornton slowly raised his hands, still wearing surgical gloves covered in blood. "If I don't finish this procedure, she'll die. The neural implant is half installed. Moving it now will cause massive hemorrhaging." It was a hostage situation unlike any Sullivan had encountered. The hostage was unconscious, and the hostage-taker claimed to be trying to save her. "Step away from the patient," Sullivan commanded. "I can't. Please, Agent Sullivan, let me finish. 5 more minutes and she'll be stable. Then you can arrest me." Sullivan had to make an impossible choice. He allowed Thornton to continue, watching as the doctor completed the procedure with steady hands despite having guns pointed at him. When Thornton finally stepped back, the patient's vital signs were stable. Medical teams rushed in to take over. "She would have killed herself within the week," Thornton said as Sullivan cuffed him. "I've been monitoring her for months. 7 attempts in 2 years. Her brain chemistry is fundamentally broken. I was fixing it. You don't get to make that choice for people, don't I? Society makes it all the time. We institutionalize people against their will. We force medication on them. We declare them incompetent. I'm just taking it one step further." At the warehouse, they found extensive records of Thornton's operations. He had performed procedures on over 200 people in 7 years. The 38th on the FBI's list were just the most recent. Many of his early subjects had been homeless individuals whose disappearances were never reported. But they also found something else. Success stories. Videos of people who had undergone Thornton's procedures and apparently thrived. Former addicts who showed no signs of relapse. Schizophrenics who no longer heard voices. Depression sufferers who reported complete remission of symptoms. Sullivan tracked down some of these successes. They were living under new identities Thornton had provided, their past lives erased along with their mental illness. When questioned, many defended Thornton. "He saved my life," one woman said. She had been homeless, addicted to heroin, suffering from severe PTSD. Now she was clean, employed, stable. "I don't remember the treatment, but I remember the pain before it. He took that away. But you lost years of memories. Years of suffering. Years I'd rather forget anyway." The ethical questions were staggering. Thornton had violated every principle of medical ethics, but some of his victims genuinely seemed better off. How do you prosecute someone for crimes when some victims insist they were helped? During Thornton's interrogation, he remained unrepentant. "I have a 60% success rate," he said. "That's better than most psychiatric medications, better than conventional therapy. I was curing people medicine had written off. You were experimenting on human beings without consent. Consent is a luxury for those capable of rational thought. My patients were dying, Agent Sullivan, slowly, painfully, inevitably. I offered them a chance at life. 12 people died under your care. Hundreds die from conventional psychiatric treatment every year. Medication side effects, suicide during treatment, complications from electroconvulsive therapy. At least my deaths were in service of progress." Sullivan wanted to argue, but Thornton continued. "Do you know why I really lost my license? I proposed a study on voluntary neural reconstruction for severe mental illness. The medical board said it was too risky. Meanwhile, they approved drugs that caused tardive dyskinesia, metabolic syndrome, sudden cardiac death. The difference? Pharmaceutical companies have better lawyers than independent researchers. That doesn't justify kidnapping. No, it doesn't. But ask yourself this. If someone you loved was suffering from incurable mental illness, if they had tried everything and nothing worked, if they were days away from suicide and I offered them my treatment, would you really say no?" Sullivan didn't answer, but the question haunted him. The investigation revealed the full network of Thornton's operation. He had contacts in 12 hospitals, 3 psychiatric facilities, and numerous homeless shelters. Some were true believers in his work, others were paid for referrals, and some were blackmailed into cooperation. One name kept appearing in the records: Margaret Morse, listed as Thornton's program coordinator. But when they tried to find her, she seemed to not exist. No social security number, no address, no digital footprint. She's the one who selected the patients, Linda Patterson revealed during further questioning. She had some kind of gift for identifying who would respond to treatment. Thornton said she could look at someone and know if they could be helped. Where is she now? I don't know. She was always in the background, watching, taking notes. Thornton said she was essential to the program's success. The search for Margaret Morse led nowhere. Like Franklin Voss, she was a ghost in the system. Meanwhile, the victims Thornton had held in the sub-basement were struggling. Without continued treatment, some were deteriorating. The procedures Thornton had started couldn't simply be stopped. They required ongoing medical intervention. We're in an impossible situation, Dr. Chang told Sullivan. Some of these people need continued neural stimulation, or they'll develop serious complications. But the only person who knows the exact protocols is Thornton. This gave Thornton leverage. He offered to provide treatment protocols in exchange for reduced charges. You're holding their lives hostage, Sullivan accused. I'm offering to save them. Again. The question is, will your rigid adherence to the law cost them their lives? The district attorney ultimately agreed to Thornton's deal. He would provide complete treatment protocols and assist in the care of his victims in exchange for charges being reduced from kidnapping and murder to practicing medicine without a license and involuntary manslaughter. This is wrong, Sullivan said to Director Holbrook. He tortured people. He also has information that could save lives, Holbrook replied. And honestly, James, a jury might be sympathetic to him. A doctor trying to help the mentally ill when the system failed them, some would call him a hero. He's a monster. Maybe, or maybe he's something more complicated. Either way, we need his cooperation. The aftermath of Thornton's arrest brought unexpected complications. Within days of his incarceration, 3 of his former patients attempted suicide. Without the continued treatments Thornton had been providing, their original conditions had returned with devastating intensity. Sullivan stood in the hospital room of Jennifer Huang, one of Thornton's successes, who had tried to overdose when her depression returned. "You don't understand," she whispered. "For 6 months I was free. No voices, no despair, no constant weight crushing me. I could think clearly for the first time in my life. And now it's all back, worse than before. The treatments Thornton gave you were illegal, dangerous. They worked. That's all that mattered to me." This pattern repeated across the city. Thornton's patients, both the successes and failures, were deteriorating without his intervention. The medical establishment was at a loss. They didn't understand his procedures well enough to continue or safely discontinue them. Director Holbrook called an emergency meeting. "We have a crisis. 17 people are now in critical condition. The prosecutors are considering dropping all charges against Thornton if he agrees to help." "That's insane," Sullivan protested. "He kidnapped and tortured people. He also apparently developed treatments that work, even if his methods were criminal. The medical community is desperate to understand what he did." Against Sullivan's objections, Thornton was brought to a secure medical facility where he could consult on his former patient's care. Seeing him in a lab coat again, calmly directing treatments, made Sullivan's skin crawl. But the results were undeniable. Under Thornton's guidance, the deteriorating patients stabilized. Some even improved beyond their original baseline. "You see, Agent Sullivan," Thornton said during a break, "this is why I did what I did. Conventional medicine had nothing to offer these people. I gave them hope." "You gave them false hope. Treatments that only work with your continued involvement aren't cures, they're dependencies. All medicine creates dependencies. Diabetics depend on insulin. Heart patients depend on pacemakers. Why is neurological intervention different?" Before Sullivan could respond, his phone rang. It was Agent Petrova. "James, we found something. Remember Margaret Morse? She's real, but not what we expected. She's been a patient at Bellevue's psychiatric ward for 40 years. Sullivan rushed to Bellevue, where he found a woman in her 70s, sitting in a common room, drawing intricate patterns in a notebook. According to her file, Margaret Morse had been institutionalized for schizophrenia since 1983. "Ms. Morse? I'm Agent Sullivan with the FBI." She looked up with surprisingly clear eyes. "I know who you are. Dr. Thornton told me you'd come eventually." "You know Thornton?" "He was my student in a way. I taught him to see what others couldn't." "I don't understand." Margaret smiled. "I have a gift, Agent Sullivan. I can see people's true neural patterns. What's broken, what can be fixed, what can't. The doctors call it schizophrenia, but it's really just a different way of perceiving. Thornton said you selected his patients. I identified who could be helped. Not everyone's brain can handle reconstruction. Some are too rigid, others too fragmented. But I could see who had the potential for change. You were part of his crimes. I was trying to help people like me. Do you know what it's like to be locked in here for 40 years, knowing you could help others but being dismissed as insane?" Margaret showed Sullivan her notebooks. Hundreds of them, filled with detailed observations of neural patterns, predictions of treatment outcomes, insights into consciousness that read like advanced neuroscience despite her having no formal training. "Thornton was the only one who listened," she continued. "He saw that my delusions were actually observations. Together, we could have revolutionized psychiatric treatment. Instead, you helped him kidnap people. We helped him select people who wanted help, even if they couldn't articulate it. Every person Thornton took was on the verge of giving up. We gave them another option." Sullivan noticed something disturbing in her recent drawings, building layouts that matched the 47 properties, but with additional sections not found in the searches. There are more facilities, he realized. Margaret neither confirmed nor denied, just continued drawing. The FBI launched new searches based on Margaret's drawings. They found 3 more underground facilities, these containing not patients but research materials, brain tissue samples, experimental data, videos of procedures that pushed the boundaries of medical ethics. In one facility, they found something that changed the case entirely: records of legitimate pharmaceutical companies that had been secretly funding Thornton's research. Major corporations had been using him to test treatments too risky for official trials. "This is bigger than just Thornton," Petrova told Sullivan. "He was being paid by 3 different drug companies. They wanted his research, but couldn't be associated with his methods." The investigation expanded. Executives at Nexus Pharmaceuticals, Biological Innovations Incorporated, and Cromwell Medical Solutions were brought in for questioning. Each claimed ignorance of Thornton's methods, saying they only funded theoretical research. But the financial records told a different story. Millions of dollars had flowed to Thornton through shell companies, and in return the pharmaceutical companies had received detailed data on neurological interventions that they were now using to develop legal drugs. They used him as a black site researcher, Sullivan explained to Holbrook. He took all the legal risks while they reaped the benefits of his discoveries. One executive, Dr. Patricia Cromwell, eventually broke under interrogation. The FDA approval process takes 15 years and billions of dollars, she said. Thornton could test theories in months that would take us decades to approve. Yes, his methods were unethical, but his discoveries could help millions. At the cost of how many victims? Every medical advancement has casualties. The first heart transplant killed the patient. Early chemotherapy was essentially poison. Progress requires sacrifice. Not unwilling sacrifice. Are you sure they were unwilling? Many of Thornton's patients sought him out after hearing rumors of his successes. They knew the risks. This was partially true. As the investigation continued, they found online forums where people with severe mental illness had shared information about Thornton's program. Some had deliberately made themselves visible to his recruiters, hoping to be selected. One post read, "Traditional treatment has failed me. If the underground doctor is real, I volunteer. Better to risk everything than live like this." Sullivan interviewed one of these voluntary patients, Marcus Rodriguez, who had sought out Thornton's treatment for his severe OCD. "I couldn't leave my apartment for 2 years," Rodriguez explained. "I washed my hands until they bled. Therapy didn't work. Medication made me a zombie. I posted on those forums hoping Thornton would find me. And he did? His people approached me. They were honest about the risks. Said the treatment was experimental, possibly dangerous, definitely illegal. I didn't care. I signed up immediately. What happened? 3 months of procedures I barely remember. But when I woke up, the OCD was gone, not managed, not reduced, gone. I could touch doorknobs, shake hands, live normally. It was a miracle. Others died from those same procedures. I know. I would have taken those odds. When you're suffering that much, a 60% chance of cure versus certain continued agony, that's an easy choice. This complicated the prosecution's case. If some victims were actually volunteers who had sought out the treatment, was it really kidnapping? The legal arguments were complex and unprecedented. Meanwhile, Thornton continued consulting from custody and his reputation grew. Some in the medical community were calling for his research to be officially studied, arguing that despite his methods, his discoveries were too valuable to ignore. "He's becoming a folk hero," Holbrook said with disgust. "Social media is calling him the Robin Hood of psychiatry." It was true. Free Dr. Thornton was trending, with thousands of people suffering from mental illness saying they would volunteer for his treatments if given the chance. The situation became more complicated when one of the pharmaceutical companies, Nexus, announced they had successfully created a legal version of one of Thornton's treatments. A neural stimulation device based on his research that could treat severe depression without surgery. "This device will help millions," Nexus's CEO announced at a press conference. "While we don't condone Dr. Thornton's methods, we can't ignore the scientific value of his discoveries." Sullivan watched in disbelief as Thornton's illegal experiments were laundered into legitimate medicine. The victims' suffering had been transformed into corporate profits. The trial began 6 months after Thornton's arrest. The courtroom was packed with journalists, mental health advocates, and former patients, some supporting Thornton, others demanding justice. Thornton's defense was simple: medical necessity. His lawyer argued that every action Thornton took was motivated by the urgent need to save lives that conventional medicine had abandoned. "Dr. Thornton is guilty of breaking laws," the defense attorney said in opening statements, "but those laws were preventing him from saving lives. Which is the greater crime, violating regulations or letting people die when you have the ability to save them?" The prosecution, led by ADA Jennifer Walsh, painted a different picture. Marcus Thornton is a predator who targeted society's most vulnerable. He exploited the mentally ill, experimented on them like lab rats, and discarded them when his experiments failed. 12 people are dead because of his arrogance. The trial featured dramatic testimony from both sides. Victims described their suffering under Thornton's care, but others testified that he had saved their lives. One of the most powerful moments came when Jennifer Huang, the patient who had attempted suicide after Thornton's arrest, took the stand. "I'm testifying for the prosecution," she said, "but I want the court to know that I would undergo Dr. Thornton's treatment again if I could. Yes, it was done without my initial consent. Yes, it was dangerous, but it gave me 6 months of life without mental illness. That's more than the traditional system ever gave me." Sullivan testified about the investigation, presenting the evidence of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and the deaths. But, under cross-examination, Thornton's lawyer pressed him on a difficult point. "Agent Sullivan, are you aware that the suicide rate for people with severe treatment-resistant depression is nearly 20%? I've heard that statistic. And are you aware that of Dr. Thornton's patients with that diagnosis, the death rate was only 8%? That doesn't justify, just answer the question. Was Dr. Thornton's treatment, despite its illegality, statistically more successful at preventing death than conventional treatment?" Sullivan had to admit it was true, though he added, "That doesn't make it legal or ethical." The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, their verdict shocked everyone. Guilty of practicing medicine without a license and involuntary manslaughter, but not guilty of kidnapping and murder. The judge, clearly troubled by the case, gave a lengthy statement before sentencing. "This case represents a fundamental conflict between law and medical progress. Dr. Thornton's actions were clearly illegal, but the evidence suggests they were motivated by a genuine desire to help rather than malice. While I cannot condone his methods, I also cannot ignore the testimony of those who say he saved their lives." Thornton was sentenced to 10 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 5. But the judge added an unusual provision. Thornton would be allowed to consult on his former patient's care from prison and could publish his research for peer review. "This is a travesty," Sullivan said to Holbrook after the verdict. "He got away with it." "Did he? He's in prison, his medical career is over, and his research is being scrutinized by every ethics board in the country. But his ideas are spreading. Other doctors are starting to propose similar treatments. Maybe that's not entirely bad, James. If his research leads to legal treatments that help people, built on the suffering of his victims, built on the suffering of people who were already suffering, it doesn't make it right, but it makes it complicated." A month after the trial, Sullivan received a call that would haunt him. Jennifer Huang had succeeded in her second suicide attempt. In her note, she wrote, "6 months of freedom was worth more than a lifetime of pain. Dr. Thornton gave me that. The system took it away." 2 years after Thornton's conviction, Sullivan was called back to a case he thought was closed. The call came from Dr. Lisa Chang at the medical examiner's office. "James, we have a problem. Remember the Thornton case? It's not over." Sullivan arrived at the morgue to find Chang standing over a body. A young man, perhaps 25, with the same surgical scars Sullivan remembered from Thornton's victims. "But Thornton's in prison," Sullivan said. "For 18 months now. This victim shows signs of procedures done within the last 6 weeks. Someone else is continuing his work." The victim was identified as Timothy Brooks, a homeless veteran with severe PTSD who had disappeared 2 months prior. The surgical techniques matched Thornton's exactly, but with improvements. more precise, less invasive. Whoever did this learned from Thornton's mistakes, Chang observed. The procedures are more sophisticated. Sullivan immediately visited Thornton in federal prison. The doctor looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held that unsettling certainty. "Someone's copying your work," Sullivan said without preamble. Thornton smiled. "Not copying, continuing, evolving." "Who?" "Agent Sullivan, did you really think I was working alone all those years? I had students, protégés, people who believed in the work." "Give me names." "I could, but what would that accomplish? Arrest one, and another takes their place. The knowledge is out there now. Published in journals, discussed in medical conferences. You can't uninvent an idea." Thornton was right. Since his trial, his research had been studied extensively. While his methods were condemned, his discoveries had led to 3 FDA-approved treatments for mental illness. The line between his criminal experiments and legitimate medicine had blurred. "People are dying," Sullivan said. "People are being saved. Yes, some procedures fail, but the success rate is improving. My students learn from each failure. Your students are criminals. My students are doctors who refuse to let bureaucracy prevent them from helping people." Sullivan left the prison with no new information but a growing dread. Thornton's network hadn't died with his arrest. It had metastasized. Over the next month, 3 more bodies appeared. All homeless individuals with mental illness, all showing signs of neural reconstruction procedures. But unlike Thornton's victims, these showed signs of improvement before their deaths. The procedures had been partially successful. The investigation led to a disturbing discovery. There was an entire underground network of medical professionals continuing Thornton's work. They called themselves the Hippocratic Underground, claiming the traditional medical system had failed its oath to, first, do no harm, by allowing people to suffer when treatments existed. The network operated through encrypted forums, sharing techniques, patient data, and locations of secret treatment facilities. They had learned from Thornton's mistakes. They were more careful about patient selection, more conservative with procedures, and most importantly, they had established a system of aftercare to prevent the deterioration that had plagued Thornton's patients. Sullivan's team identified several members of the network, but arresting them proved nearly impossible. They operated across state lines, used false identities, and had the support of a growing movement of desperate patients and their families. One doctor they did catch was Dr. Catherine Morris, a former Johns Hopkins neurosurgeon who had lost her license for refusing to stop experimental treatments. "You don't understand," Morris said during interrogation. "The medical establishment has become so risk-averse that innovation is impossible. How many people have to die waiting for FDA approval while treatments exist? Those treatments are unproven, dangerous. Everything is dangerous until it's proven. The first vaccines killed people. The first antibiotics caused fatal reactions. But we learned, improved, saved millions. That's what we're doing. You're experimenting on people. We're offering options to people who have none. Every patient consents knowing the risks. Consent obtained from desperate people isn't real consent. Then no medical treatment for terminal illness is consensual. Desperation doesn't negate agency." Agent Sullivan. The ethical debates were exhausting and seemingly endless. For every victim Sullivan's team found, they discovered 2 success stories. People whose lives had been transformed by the underground treatments. Maria Gonzalez, the housing inspector who had started the investigation, reached out to Sullivan. "I've been following the case," she said over coffee. "The 47 buildings, they're being sold. To whom? Different buyers, but I track the funding. It's coming from a trust called the Thornton Foundation." Sullivan's blood chilled. That's impossible. His assets were frozen. Not his supporters. They're raising money, buying the properties, planning to turn them into legitimate treatment centers. We have to stop them. On what grounds? If they get proper licenses, hire legitimate doctors, follow regulations, they'll be legal. Sullivan realized the truth. Thornton had lost his freedom, but his ideas had won. The underground network was surfacing, legitimizing itself, transforming from criminal enterprise to medical movement. 6 months later, the first Thornton Foundation clinic opened in Brooklyn. It operated legally, offering experimental treatments for treatment-resistant mental illness. The treatments were based on Thornton's research, but modified to meet ethical standards. Patients underwent extensive screening, gave informed consent, and were closely monitored. The success rate was lower than Thornton's claimed 60%, but still impressive. People who had exhausted all other options found relief. The waiting list grew to thousands within months. Sullivan watched from outside the clinic on opening day. Protesters held signs both supporting and condemning the facility. Former patients of Thornton spoke to media, some calling him a monster, others a savior. Director Holbrook joined him. Strange how things turn out. He won, Sullivan said bitterly. Thornton's in prison, but his vision is becoming reality. Or maybe the truth is more complex. His methods were wrong, criminal. But perhaps his insights weren't entirely without merit. 12 people died, and hundreds are alive because of treatments developed from his research. I'm not saying it justifies what he did, but what? But maybe some good can come from evil. Maybe that's the best we can hope for. Sullivan's phone rang. It was Thornton calling from prison. Congratulations, Agent Sullivan. Thornton's voice was smug. You've witnessed the birth of a new era in psychiatry. You're still in prison. My body is, but my ideas, they're free, growing, evolving. In 10 years, what I did will be standard practice, refined and regulated, but essentially the same. It will never be the same. The legal treatments have oversight, ethics, accountability. Details, the core principle that we must take risks to advance medicine, that's what matters. I forced the conversation. Made people confront the reality that our fear of liability was killing more people than bold action ever could. You're trying to rewrite history, make yourself a hero. History will decide what I am. But tell me, Agent Sullivan, if someone you loved was suffering, and the Thornton Foundation could help them, would you really say no? Sullivan hung up without answering, but the question lingered. A year later, Sullivan was called to a scene that brought the case full circle. Margaret Morse, the psychiatric patient who had helped Thornton select his victims, had been found dead in her room at Bellevue. Natural causes, the medical examiner said. She was 78, her body finally giving out. But she'd left something behind. Hundreds of notebooks filled with observations about neural patterns, predictions about treatment outcomes, insights that neuroscientists were calling groundbreaking. She wasn't delusional, Dr. Chang told Sullivan. Her observations about brain function, they're being confirmed by modern imaging. She really could see things others couldn't. She was still complicit in kidnapping and murder. She was, but she was also a genius whose mental illness prevented her from being recognized. It makes you wonder how many other insights we've dismissed as madness. The Thornton Foundation acquired Morse's notebooks, using her observations to refine their treatments. The success rate improved to 70%. Other cities began opening similar clinics. Medical schools started teaching courses based on Thornton's research. Sullivan retired early, unable to reconcile what he'd witnessed. The clear lines between right and wrong had blurred beyond recognition. Thornton remained in prison, but his influence grew. He published papers, consulted on cases, became a controversial but undeniable force in psychiatry. On the 5th anniversary of the initial investigation, Sullivan received a package. Inside was a report from the Thornton Foundation. They had treated over 10,000 patients. 7,000 had shown significant improvement. 2,500 had shown moderate improvement. 400 had shown no change. 100 had died from complications. A note was attached. Agent Sullivan, the numbers speak for themselves. 90% helped, 1% lost. What other medical intervention can claim such success with such desperate cases? History will vindicate me. MT. Sullivan burned the report, but he couldn't burn the knowledge. Thornton had been a criminal, a kidnapper, a killer. But he had also been right about one thing. The system had been failing people, and his crimes had forced it to change. The 47 buildings stood as monuments to this complicated truth. Once sites of illegal experiments and suffering, they were now legitimate treatment centers offering hope to thousands. The empty properties had been filled with purpose, but at what cost? Sullivan stood outside Building 31, now the flagship Thornton Foundation facility. A plaque by the door read, "In memory of those who suffered, so others might heal." It didn't mention Thornton by name, but everyone knew. A woman approached him, Jennifer Huang's sister. "Agent Sullivan, I wanted to thank you." For what? For catching Thornton, for stopping him. But also the treatments that came from his research. They saved my other sister. She was going down the same path as Jennifer, but the Foundation's treatment worked. She's alive because of what happened here. Your sister, Jennifer, died because of what happened here. I know, that's what makes it so hard. The evil and the good are so intertwined, I don't know how to feel. Grateful? Angry? Both? Both, Sullivan said. Definitely both. As the woman walked away, Sullivan took one last look at the building. The FBI had closed the case, justice had been served, and yet nothing felt resolved. The empty properties were full now, but the moral emptiness left by the case would never be filled. Thornton had been wrong to kidnap and experiment on people, but he had been right that desperate people deserved desperate measures. The system had changed, lives had been saved, but at the cost of principles that should never have been compromised. Sullivan walked away, knowing he would never return. The case was closed, but its questions would remain open forever. In the end, Marcus Thornton had achieved exactly what he'd wanted. Not freedom for himself, but freedom for his ideas. And perhaps that was the most disturbing truth of all. The antique shop sat on a quiet corner of Greenwich Village, squeezed between a trendy coffee shop and a used bookstore. Memento Mori Antiquities read the faded gold lettering on the window. To most passers-by, it was just another dusty relic of old New York, the kind of place that somehow survived despite never seeming to have customers. Special Agent Diana Foster first noticed the shop not because of what it was, but because of who went there. It started with a routine surveillance operation. Foster had been tracking Anthony Valdez, a mid-level drug distributor, through Lower Manhattan. But instead of meeting his supplier in some warehouse or nightclub, Valdez had walked into Memento Mori and stayed for exactly 47 minutes. When he emerged, he carried no package, no bag, nothing to suggest a transaction. But his demeanor had changed. The nervous energy that characterized him was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. More importantly, the tracking device in his phone showed he'd made a large cryptocurrency transfer while inside. Foster might have dismissed it as coincidence. if not for what happened over the next 3 weeks. 7 more criminals from her watch list visited the shop. Different crimes, fraud, human trafficking, arms dealing, but all entered empty-handed and left the same way. All stayed for exactly 47 minutes. All made significant financial transactions during their visits. "You're overthinking this," her partner, Agent Robert Keyes, said when she presented her findings. "It's probably just a front for money laundering." But Foster's instincts, honed over 12 years with the FBI, told her differently. Money laundering operations didn't have such precise timing, and they certainly didn't leave their clients looking haunted. She decided to visit the shop herself. The bell above the door rang with a deep, resonant tone that seemed to linger longer than it should. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Crowded with furniture from different eras, walls lined with paintings whose eyes seemed to follow her, display cases filled with jewelry that looked too expensive to be genuine. "May I help you?" The voice came from behind a Victorian writing desk. The man who stood was tall, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the kind of refined features that belonged in a university faculty photo. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that looked decades old, but impeccably maintained. "Just browsing," Foster said, affecting the casual tone of a tourist. "Of course. I'm Edmund Thorne, the proprietor. Please, take your time. Every piece here has a story, and stories are meant to be discovered, not rushed." Foster moved through the shop, noting the lack of price tags, the absence of any modern technology, no computer, no credit card reader, not even a cash register she could see. But what struck her most were the items themselves. They weren't just old, they were specific. Personal. A pocket watch with an inscription in German dated 1943. A child's music box that played a melody she didn't recognize. A leather-bound ledger filled with names and dates in spidery handwriting. A collection of photographs from what appeared to be crime scenes from the early 1900s. "That particular piece has an interesting provenance," Thorne said, appearing silently beside her as she examined the photographs. They belonged to a New York detective who worked some of the city's most notorious cases. He documented everything, perhaps obsessively so. "These look like murder scenes," Foster observed. "Indeed they are." The detective believed in studying the patterns of violence, understanding what drove people to their darkest acts. He kept meticulous records, hoping to predict and prevent future crimes. "And you sell these?" "I don't sell anything, Agent Foster. I facilitate connections between items and their rightful owners." Foster's blood chilled. She hadn't identified herself as an agent. "How did you?" "Your posture, your systematic examination of the shop, the way you catalog everything mentally rather than touching. Law enforcement, federal, given your confidence in entering alone. FBI, most likely, given recent interest in my establishment." Foster's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon. "There's no need for that," Thorne said mildly. "I run a legitimate business. My customers value their privacy, certainly, but privacy isn't illegal. Your customers include known criminals. My customers include collectors. What they collect outside my shop is their business. What they acquire here is perfectly legal." "What exactly do they acquire? I noticed Mr. Valdez left empty-handed." Thorne smiled. "Did he? Or did he leave with exactly what he came for? Not all transactions involve physical objects, Agent Foster. Sometimes people come seeking information, provenance verification, appraisals of items they already own. For exactly 47 minutes. I offer a specific service that requires a specific amount of time. Think of it as a consultation." "What kind of consultation?" "The kind that helps people understand the true value of what they possess, Please, let me show you." Against her better judgment, Foster followed Thorne to a door marked "Private" at the back of the shop. It opened onto a narrow staircase leading down. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, all black and white, all showing people at what appeared to be auctions or estate sales. "My previous clients," Thorne explained. "Each one came to me with something they believed was valuable. I helped them understand its true worth." The basement was unlike the shop above. It was modern, clinical almost, with stark white walls and bright LED lighting. In the center sat two chairs facing each other, and between them a small table. Along the walls were filing cabinets, each labeled with years dating back to the 1970s. "Please, sit," Thorne said, taking one chair. Foster remained standing. "What is this?" "A consultation room. People bring me objects, inherited items, purchased pieces, found things. I tell them their history, their real history, not the stories sellers spin or families pass down." "You're saying you're what, a historian?" "I'm saying I have access to records that most people don't know exist. Police files, insurance documents, estate records, genealogical databases. I've spent 40 years building a network of information about objects that have passed through New York's underground economy." Foster noticed a computer terminal in the corner, multiple monitors displaying what looked like database interfaces. "Mr. Valdez," Foster said. "What did he want to know?" "Client confidentiality, Agent Foster. But I can tell you that many people in certain professions acquire items without knowing their full history. Sometimes that history affects their value. Sometimes it affects their safety. You're saying criminals come to you to verify if their stolen goods are traceable? I'm saying people from all walks of life want to know if the items they possess will bring them fortune or misfortune. In Mr. Valdez's case, he had acquired something that once belonged to someone very dangerous, someone who might want it back. I simply provided him with that information." "For a price?" "For a substantial price, yes. Information is the most valuable commodity in the world, Agent Foster." Foster noticed something on one of the filing cabinets, a label that read, "NYPD evidence, disposed." Her blood ran cold. "Those files, where did you get them?" Thorne's smile didn't waver. "The city destroys evidence from closed cases after a certain period. Before destruction, items are sometimes sold at police auctions. I acquire what interests me. That's evidence from criminal cases. Was evidence. Now it's simply historical documentation, all perfectly legal, all acquired through proper channels." Foster's phone buzzed, a text from Keys. "Valdez just got arrested. Had a stolen painting in his apartment. Says he's willing to talk about where he got it." "I should go," Foster said. "Of course. But Agent Foster, before you leave, consider this. I provide a service that prevents violence. When people know the true history of what they possess, they can make informed decisions. How many murders have I prevented by warning someone that the item they bought was stolen from someone who would kill to get it back?" Foster left the shop with more questions than answers. Back at the FBI field office, she found Valdez in interrogation, looking terrified. "The painting," he kept saying. "Thorne told me about the painting. Said it was cursed. Said everyone who'd owned it had died badly." "What painting?" Foster asked. "A portrait, 19th century. I bought it from a fence, thought I could sell it for 10 times what I paid, but Thorne, he showed me the records. 7 previous owners, all died within a year of acquiring it. Murdered, every one of them." "That's superstition." "No, it's not. He showed me the police reports, the newspaper articles. The painting belonged to a crime family in the 1920s. They've been hunting it ever since it was stolen from them." anyone who has it becomes a target. Foster pulled up the painting's history. Valdez was right. 7 owners, 7 murders, spanning almost a century. The Torino crime family had indeed been searching for it, considering it a matter of honor to recover what was stolen from them. "Thorne saved my life," Valdez said. "I was going to sell it to a collector in Miami. The Torinos would have found me." This complicated things. If Thorne was warning criminals about dangerous items, was he preventing crimes or enabling them? Foster returned to the shop that evening with a warrant, but when she arrived, the basement had been cleared out. The filing cabinets were gone, the computer removed. Only the chairs and table remained. Thorne was sitting in the shop, reading a book as if nothing had happened. "Agent Foster, I expected you'd return." "Where are the files?" "What files?" "This is an antique shop. We sell antiques. I was here this afternoon. I saw—" "You saw what you needed to see. Mr. Valdez is alive because of what you saw. The painting will be returned to its rightful owners, and a cycle of violence that has lasted 90 years will end. Isn't that what law enforcement wants?" Foster arrested him for obstruction, but they both knew it wouldn't stick. There was no evidence of the consultation room, no proof of the files. The basement was just a basement. But as they were leaving, Thorne said something that chilled her. "Your father's badge, Agent Foster, the one you carry. You should know its history." Foster's hand went to her pocket, where she kept her father's NYPD badge. He'd been killed in the line of duty when she was 12. "What about it?" "Badge 2847. Your father was investigating a series of murders when he died. The official report said he was killed interrupting a convenience store robbery. But the badge has a different story to tell. If you want to know the truth, you know where to find me." Foster had Thorne processed and released. There was nothing to hold him on, but his words haunted her. That night, she pulled her father's case file. The official report was clean, simple. But now she noticed inconsistencies. The convenience store had no security footage from that night. The witness who reported the shooting disappeared shortly after giving his statement. She returned to Memento Mori the next day. Thorne was waiting, as if he'd expected her. "The badge," she said simply. Thorne led her to the back room. This time, it was different. The walls were covered with photographs and documents, all related to her father's death. "Your father was investigating a corruption ring within the NYPD," Thorne said. "Officers who were selling evidence from crime scenes. He was getting close to exposing them when he was killed. The convenience store robbery was staged." "You're lying." Thorne pulled out a ledger. Foster recognized it. It was the same one she'd seen in the shop on her first visit. Inside were records of evidence sales, signed by officers she knew, officers who had attended her father's funeral. "Page 47, Thorne said. "The night your father died." Foster read the entry. Evidence from a murder case, sold to a private collector. The officer who signed for it was her father's partner, Detective Ray Morrison. Below that, a note. "MF getting too close. Problem resolved. MF, Michael Foster, her father." Morrison had him killed? Morrison was part of it. The corruption went all the way up to the deputy chief. Your father's death was ordered from the top. Foster's hand shook. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you came looking for criminals in my shop, but the real criminals are the ones you work alongside every day. I collect information, Agent Foster. I preserve the truth that others try to bury. Sometimes that truth is about stolen paintings. Sometimes it's about stolen lives. If this is real, why didn't you come forward?" "To whom?" "The police who killed your father? The FBI who turned a blind eye? I've learned that information is more powerful when it reaches the right person at the right time. You're the right person. This is the right time. Foster took photos of everything, but as she was leaving, Thorne stopped her. There's more, Agent Foster. Your father wasn't the only one. I have records of 17 officers killed by their own departments over the past 30 years. All were investigating corruption. All died in ways that were explained away. Give me everything. Information has a price. What do you want? Protection. There are people who would very much like to see my collection destroyed, people in your own organization. I need someone on the inside who values truth over politics. Foster made a decision that would change everything. Deal. The partnership between Foster and Thorne was an uneasy one. She couldn't arrest him without evidence, and he wouldn't provide information without protection. But over the next 3 months, the intelligence he provided led to the largest corruption bust in NYPD history. 17 officers were arrested, including Deputy Chief Ray Morrison, her father's former partner. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, documented evidence sales, even recordings Thorne had somehow obtained of officers discussing their crimes. Morrison broke during interrogation, admitting to ordering Michael Foster's death. Your father was a Boy Scout, Morrison told Foster during the interrogation. Wouldn't take bribes, wouldn't look the other way. He was going to destroy everything we'd built. We gave him chances to join us, but he refused. So, you had him murdered? We had him silenced. It was business, nothing personal. Foster wanted to attack him, but she maintained her composure. Who else was involved? You want names? Fine, but understand this goes beyond just the NYPD. We were selling to collectors, private investigators, even other law enforcement agencies. The FBI has buyers too, Agent Foster. Your own house isn't clean. This revelation led to an internal FBI investigation that uncovered 3 agents who had been purchasing illegal evidence. The scandal rocked both agencies, but Foster had become untouchable. The agent who exposed corruption in 2 of America's most powerful law enforcement organizations. But her relationship with Thorne remained complicated. She knew he was more than just an information broker. The 47-minute consultations continued, and criminals kept visiting his shop. One night, Foster decided to surveil the shop herself. She watched as Marcus King, a high-end art thief, entered at exactly 9 p.m. Through the window, she could see them in the consultation room. Thorne showed King something on his computer, then pulled out what looked like old photographs. King left looking shaken, and Foster followed him. He went straight to a storage unit in Queens, emerged with a wrapped painting, and drove to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He left the painting at the security desk with a note and fled. The next morning, the news reported that a Vermeer painting, stolen from the Met in 1987, had been mysteriously returned. Foster confronted Thorne. You're running some kind of recovery operation, convincing thieves to return stolen items. I'm providing information that leads to informed decisions, Thorne replied. Mr. King learned that the painting he possessed had a history that made it unsellable and dangerous to keep. What kind of history? The kind that involves 3 previous owners who tried to sell it. All 3 were murdered by competitors who wanted the painting for themselves. Mr. King wisely decided that returning it anonymously was preferable to becoming the 4th casualty. You're manipulating them with fear. I'm educating them with facts. Every item that passes through the black market has a history. Some histories are bloodier than others. Would you prefer these items remain in criminal hands? Foster had to admit he had a point. In the 6 months since she'd discovered the shop, Thorne's consultations had led to the recovery of dozens of stolen items worth millions of dollars. The criminals who returned them were never prosecuted. There was no evidence linking them to the returned items. But then, something changed. A new client started visiting the shop. Someone Foster didn't recognize from any criminal database. She was young, maybe 25, with an Eastern European accent. She visited every Tuesday at exactly 7 p.m., staying for the requisite 47 minutes. Foster ran facial recognition and got nothing. The woman was a ghost, but her license plate traced back to a diplomatic vehicle registered to the Russian consulate. "What's a Russian diplomat doing in Thorne's shop?" Keyes asked when Foster briefed him. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Foster intercepted the woman after her next visit. "FBI, I need to ask you some questions." The woman smiled. "I have diplomatic immunity, Agent Foster, but I'll answer your questions as a courtesy. My name is Natasha Volkov. I'm a cultural attaché with the Russian Federation." "What's your business with Edmund Thorne?" "Mr. Thorne is helping us recover items that were stolen from Russian museums during the chaos of the 1990s. Many pieces ended up in New York's black market. He has connections and knowledge that help us locate our cultural heritage." "You're saying the Russian government is officially working with him?" "Unofficially. Officially, we know nothing about Mr. Thorne. But several important pieces have been anonymously returned to our museums recently. We're very grateful to whoever is responsible." This opened up a whole new dimension to Thorne's operation. He wasn't just handling local criminals. He was operating internationally, facilitating the return of stolen cultural artifacts. Foster decided to confront him directly. "The Russians, Thorne. You're working with foreign governments now?" "I work with anyone who wants to correct historical injustices," Thorne replied calmly. "Items stolen during wars, artifacts looted from museums, paintings taken from Jewish families during the Holocaust. These things surface in New York constantly. I simply facilitate their return to rightful owners, without any legal process. The legal process takes decades and often fails. My way is faster and more effective, and profitable. Information has value. I never claimed to be altruistic." Foster noticed a new addition to the shop, a painting she recognized from Interpol's most wanted list. The landscape with windmills, stolen from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam in 2002. Allegedly stolen. It's here on consignment from a private collector who inherited it from his father. He had no idea it was stolen until I informed him. Now he wants to do the right thing, but he's afraid of prosecution. "So, you're facilitating its return?" "I'm facilitating a conversation between the current possessor and the museum. If they can come to an understanding, the painting goes home. If not, it remains in legal limbo. This is still trafficking in stolen goods." "Is it?" "I never take possession. I simply provide information and introduction services. The painting's owner is free to do whatever he wishes with his property." The legal gray area was maddening. Thorne never technically broke the law, but he was clearly profiting from criminal activity. Yet his actions were leading to positive outcomes. Stolen items returned, violent crimes prevented, corruption exposed. Foster's investigation took another turn when she discovered Thorne's past. His real name was Edmund Thornbury, and he'd been a curator at the Museum of Modern Art in the 1970s. He'd been fired for refusing to authenticate a forgery that the museum's board wanted to acquire. The forger had connections to organized crime, and Thornbury had received death threats for his refusal to cooperate. He'd disappeared for 5 years, then re-emerged as Edmund Thorne, antique dealer and information broker. The shop had been operating since 1981, making it one of Greenwich Village's longest-running businesses. 40 years, Foster said to him during one of their meetings. 40 years of facilitating criminal transactions. 40 years of preventing violence and returning stolen property, Thorne countered. How many murders have I prevented by warning criminals about the dangerous provenance of their stolen goods? How many artifacts have been returned to their rightful owners? The ledger balances in my favor, Agent Foster. You profit from crime. I profit from information. Crime exists with or without me. At least with my involvement, some good comes from it. Their philosophical debates were interrupted by a crisis. 3 of Thorne's recent clients had been murdered within a week of visiting his shop. All had been killed in their homes, execution style, with no witnesses and no evidence. Foster investigated the connection. All 3 had been art thieves who specialized in religious artifacts. All had visited Thorne to inquire about items they'd recently acquired. Someone's hunting your clients, Foster told Thorne. For the first time since she'd met him, Thorne looked genuinely concerned. The collectors, he said quietly. I was afraid this might happen. Who are the collectors? A group that acquires religious artifacts by any means necessary. They believe certain items have a significance beyond their monetary value. They've been dormant for years, but if they're active again. You're saying they're killing thieves to get religious artifacts. I'm saying they're eliminating competition. These 3 thieves all had items the collectors want. Now, those items are missing, and the thieves are dead. How do you know about this group? Thorne pulled out an old photograph. It showed a group of men in suits standing in what looked like Thorne's basement. The photo was dated 1953. The shop has been here longer than I have, Thorne explained. The previous owner left extensive records. The collectors used to meet here, plan their acquisitions. They stopped in the 1960s when their leader died, but it seems they've reorganized. Why didn't you report this? Report what? A defunct organization from the 1950s? I had no idea they were active again until these murders. Foster took the photograph and ran facial recognition on everyone in it. Most were long dead, but one face matched a current person of interest. William Ashford, a wealthy collector who'd been suspected but never charged in several art thefts. Ashford's in his 90s, Keyes said when Foster briefed him. You really think he's running a murder ring? Maybe not running it, but connected to it. We need to bring him in. They found Ashford in his Park Avenue penthouse, surrounded by one of the finest private art collections in the world. He was frail, confined to a wheelchair, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Agent Foster, he said before she could introduce herself. Edmund said you might come. You know Thorne. I've known him for 40 years. We have an understanding. He keeps certain items out of circulation, and I don't interfere with his business. What items? Dangerous ones. Items that certain groups would kill to possess. The 3 dead thieves. They had pieces from the Vatican secret archives, stolen during renovations in the 1960s. Documents and artifacts that should never have left Vatican City. And the collectors want them? The collectors believe these items contain evidence of historical irregularities in church doctrine. Things that could shake the faith of billions. They're not wrong, but they're also not right. The truth is more complex than they understand. Where are the items now? Safe. Edmund has them. He's the only one I trust to keep them from the collectors. Foster felt like she was falling down a rabbit hole. Religious artifacts, secret societies, Vatican conspiracies. It was far beyond a simple FBI investigation. But the murders were real, and they were escalating. 2 more of Thorne's clients were killed the following week. The pattern was clear. Anyone who'd consulted Thorne about religious artifacts was being targeted. Foster set up protection for Thorne, but he refused it. I can protect myself, he said. I've been doing it for 40 years. That night, the shop was attacked. 3 armed men broke in, clearly looking for something specific. But Thorne was ready. The shop's security system, which Foster had thought was non-existent, turned out to be highly sophisticated. The moment the men entered, steel shutters dropped over the windows and doors, trapping them inside. Gas began filling the shop, not lethal, but incapacitating. Within minutes, all 3 attackers were unconscious. Foster arrived to find Thorne calmly sitting at his desk, reading, while 3 men lay unconscious on his shop floor. "You have a gas system in your shop?" "I have many security measures, Agent Foster. When you deal with dangerous people and dangerous items, preparation is essential." The 3 men were arrested and quickly identified as members of a radical religious group called the True Faith Brotherhood. Under interrogation, they revealed they'd been hired to retrieve holy relics from Thorne's shop. "Who hired you?" Foster demanded. "God's servant," one replied. "He speaks with divine authority. He told us the relics were being hidden by a servant of Satan." "Name? I need a name." "Father Benedict. He runs a church in Brooklyn. He's been collecting holy relics for years, preparing for the final judgment." Foster and a tactical team raided the church that night. They found Father Benedict in a hidden room beneath the altar, surrounded by hundreds of stolen religious artifacts. The walls were covered with photographs of Thorne's clients, the dead ones marked with red X's. Benedict was actually Benjamin Torino, a former mob enforcer who'd found religion in prison and emerged convinced he was on a divine mission to collect sacred artifacts. "These items belong to God," he ranted as he was arrested. "Those who traffic in them are committing blasphemy. They deserve death." "You're a serial killer hiding behind religion," Foster told him. "I'm a soldier of Christ. The shopkeeper, Thorne, he's been hiding sacred relics for decades. He must be stopped." The evidence in Benedict's church was overwhelming. Plans for more murders, detailed surveillance of Thorne's shop, even a manifesto describing his plan to cleanse the artifact trade of all non-believers. But during the raid, Foster found something else. Records suggesting Benedict wasn't working alone. There were references to a council that had approved his actions, funded his operations. "The real collectors," Thorne said when Foster showed him the evidence. Benedict was just their weapon. The people behind this have been operating for decades, using fanatics like him to do their dirty work. "Who are they?" "Wealthy individuals who believe certain artifacts have power. They're not necessarily religious, but they use religious extremists to acquire what they want." Benedict probably didn't even know he was being manipulated. "We need names, Thorne." "I can give you names, but you'll never prove anything. These people are too smart, too connected. They've been doing this since before you were born." The arrest of Father Benedict, aka Benjamin Torino, should have ended the killings. But 3 days after his incarceration, another of Thorne's clients was murdered. This time, the victim was a prominent museum curator named Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, who had visited the shop to verify the authenticity of a Renaissance painting. Foster found Hartley's body in her Upper East Side apartment. Unlike the previous murders, this one was staged to look like a suicide. But Foster knew better. Hartley had been researching something before her death, and her computer's hard drive had been wiped clean. "Benedict's in solitary confinement," Keyes said. "He couldn't have ordered this hit." "Which means he really was just a weapon," Foster replied. "Someone else is pulling the strings." She returned to Thorne's shop, finding him cataloging a new shipment of items. His calm demeanor in the face of mounting violence was unsettling. "Dr. Hartley wasn't involved in religious artifacts," Foster said. "Why was she targeted?" Thorne set down the Victorian lamp he'd been examining. Elizabeth was investigating something far more dangerous than religious relics. She'd discovered a forgery ring operating within New York's major museums. Forgery ring? For the past 30 years, someone has been systematically replacing authentic pieces with expert forgeries, then selling the originals on the black market. Elizabeth came to me with her suspicions. I confirmed them. How? Because I've been tracking the forgeries for decades. Look. Thorne led her to a hidden room behind a bookshelf, a space Foster hadn't known existed. The walls were covered with photographs of paintings, sculptures, and artifacts. Each photo had two versions side by side. Original and forgery, Thorne explained. I've documented over 300 pieces. The forgeries are so good that even experts can't tell them apart without detailed analysis. Why didn't you report this? To whom? The museums involved? They're complicit. The insurance companies, they've been paying out claims on stolen originals while the forgeries hang in their place. The FB. How do I explain that I know about this through my criminal connections? Foster studied the photographs. The scale was staggering. If Thorne was right, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art in New York's museums was fake. Who's behind it? That's what Elizabeth was trying to find out. She traced financial records, shipping manifests, restoration documents. She found a pattern. All the forgeries were created during restoration periods when the originals were off display. Inside job. Multiple inside jobs, coordinated across multiple institutions. Elizabeth identified 7 museum employees who were involved, but they were just facilitators. The real orchestrator remains hidden. Foster took photographs of Thorne's evidence. I need everything you have on this. That's dangerous, Agent Foster. Elizabeth died because she got too close. Then, help me stay alive? Who would kill to protect this operation? Thorne pulled out a ledger, this one bound in red leather. These are my records of every major art transaction in New York's black market for the past 20 years. Look for patterns. Foster spent hours going through the ledger. One name kept appearing. The Curator. Not a real name, but a code name for someone who brokered deals for the highest-end stolen art. The Curator never meets clients directly, Thorne explained. Everything goes through intermediaries. But I've noticed something. Every major forgery coincides with one of the Curator's sales. He's not just selling stolen art. He's selling the originals that have been replaced with forgeries. You know who it is. I have suspicions, but suspicions aren't proof. Before Foster could press him, her phone rang. It was the medical examiner's office. They'd found something in Dr. Hartley's autopsy. She was poisoned, Dr. Chang told Foster. Tetrodotoxin, pufferfish poison. Injected, not ingested. Someone wanted it to look like a heart attack, but they used too much. Security cameras? Wiped, but we found something else. A partial fingerprint on the syringe. It matches someone in the system. The print belonged to Marcus Webb, senior restoration specialist at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Foster's team arrested him at his workshop, surrounded by paintings in various stages of restoration. Webb didn't resist, didn't even seem surprised. "I've been expecting you," he said calmly, "though I thought it would be about the forgeries, not the murder." "You admit to killing Dr. Hartley?" "I admit to nothing. But I will say that Elizabeth was getting too close to something that would have destroyed the art world in New York. Do you have any idea what would happen if people discovered that half the masterpieces in our museums are fake? The truth would come out. The truth would destroy public trust, bankrupt museums, and throw the entire art market into chaos. Billions of dollars in value would evaporate overnight. So you killed her to protect a lie? Webb laughed bitterly. I'm just a forger, Agent Foster. A very good one, but still just a craftsman. The person who ordered Elizabeth's death, who's been orchestrating this for decades. They're someone you'd never suspect. Give me a name. I don't know their real name. But I can tell you this, they're someone with access to every major museum in New York, someone above suspicion, someone who's been hiding in plain sight. Webb's interrogation revealed the mechanics of the forgery ring, but not its leadership. He'd been creating forgeries for 15 years, receiving commissions through encrypted emails and dead drops. Payment came through cryptocurrency, untraceable. But Foster had a lead. Webb mentioned that the curator always insisted on specific delivery locations for the original paintings. Cross-referencing these locations with Thorne's records, she found a pattern. They all connected to properties owned by the Steinberg Foundation, one of New York's largest art philanthropies. The foundation's director was Margaret Steinberg, an 85-year-old patron of the arts who'd donated millions to museums across the city. She was also on the board of directors for 6 major cultural institutions. You can't seriously suspect Margaret Steinberg, Keyes said. She's practically a saint in the art world. Which would make her the perfect person to orchestrate this, Foster replied. She needed proof. Foster returned to Thorne's shop with the new information. Margaret Steinberg, she said. Tell me about her. Thorne's expression was unreadable. A complicated woman. She's been coming to my shop for 40 years. She's one of your clients. One of my first. She started visiting in 1981, right after I opened. Always interested in provenance and the history of pieces. I thought she was just a conscientious collector. But over the years, I noticed patterns. Items she inquired about would later surface as donations to museums. Except the donated pieces were subtly different from the ones she'd asked about. She was donating forgeries and keeping the originals? That was my suspicion. But Margaret Steinberg has donated over $500 million to the arts. No one would dare question her. Foster's investigation intensified. She discovered that Steinberg had connections to every museum where forgeries had been identified. She was always involved in restoration committees, acquisition boards, authentication processes. But they needed concrete evidence. Foster decided on a risky move. She would go undercover as a black market art dealer, trying to sell a stolen painting to the curator. Thorne provided the perfect bait, a small Monet that had been stolen from a private collection. Actually, a forgery Webb had created that was so good it would fool initial inspections. The plan worked. Foster, using the alias Diana Mitchell, made contact through the dark web. The curator was interested. A meeting was arranged at a warehouse in Brooklyn. Foster wore a wire, had backup stationed nearby. But when she arrived at the warehouse, she found not Margaret Steinberg, but her grandson, David Steinberg, a 35-year-old hedge fund manager who'd recently joined the family foundation. Ms. Mitchell, David said smoothly, I understand you have something interesting for us. Foster played her role, showing him the Monet. David examined it with surprising expertise. Beautiful. My grandmother will be pleased. Your grandmother? Oh, did you think you were meeting the curator? No, I just handle acquisitions. My grandmother's the real genius. She's been building the greatest private collection in history, right under everyone's noses. By replacing originals with forgeries? David's smile turned cold. By preserving art for those who truly appreciate it. Museums treat these masterpieces like public property, letting any tourist with a ticket gawk at them. My grandmother believes art should be owned, cherished, protected by those who understand its value. And selling the originals? That's about money? Money is just a tool. We use the profits to acquire more pieces, to expand the collection. In her private gallery, my grandmother has artworks the world believes are lost or destroyed. The real Mona Lisa, not the copy hanging in the Louvre. The original Starry Night. Masterpieces saved from public degradation. Foster couldn't believe what she was hearing, but she needed more. I want to meet her, the real curator. Impossible. Grandmother doesn't meet dealers. Then how do I know this isn't a setup? How do I know you're really who you say you are? David considered this. Then he made a call. Grandmother? Yes, there's someone here who insists on meeting you. Yes, I know the protocol, but she has a genuine Monet very well. He hung up. She'll see you. But understand, once you meet my grandmother, you're either part of our organization or you're a problem. Problems get solved. The threat was clear. Foster's backup was listening, ready to move in. But she needed to see this through. David drove her to a mansion on Long Island, a sprawling estate that looked like a museum itself. Inside, every wall was covered with paintings. Every surface held sculptures or artifacts. Margaret Steinberg was waiting in a library that contained more art than books. She was elegant, refined, and her eyes were sharp as a razor. Miss Mitchell, David says you have something interesting. Foster presented the painting. Margaret examined it with a jeweler's loupe, running her fingers along the canvas. This is exceptional work, but it's not genuine. Foster's blood went cold. Margaret smiled. Oh, don't look so surprised. I've been authenticating art for 60 years. This is one of Marcus Webb's forgeries, which means you're either a fool who's been duped or you're FBI. Given that Agent Foster matches your description perfectly, I'm guessing the latter. David pulled a gun. Foster reached for hers, but Margaret raised a hand. No violence, not in front of the art. Agent Foster, you're here because Edmund Thorne helped you, aren't you? Dear Edmund, he's been trying to expose me for decades. You know Thorne. I knew his predecessor, the original owner of that shop. He and I had an understanding. He kept my secrets. I kept his, but Edmund never agreed to those terms. You're admitting to the forgery ring? I'm admitting to saving art from the masses. Do you know what happens to paintings in museums? They deteriorate from light exposure, from temperature changes, from the breath of millions of visitors. In my collection, they're preserved perfectly. You killed Dr. Hartley. David killed Dr. Hartley. I don't dirty my hands with such things, but yes, I ordered it. She was going to expose something beautiful, turn it into something sordid. You're under arrest, Margaret laughed. Am I? Let me show you something. She pressed a button on her desk. The walls of the library began to rotate, revealing hidden panels covered with documents and photographs. Every major political figure in New York has taken donations from my foundation. Judges, prosecutors, police commissioners. I have photographs of them with stolen art in their homes, art they thought was legitimate. If I go down, Agent Foster, I take the entire city's power structure with me. You're blackmailing the entire city? I'm protecting my life's work. 40 years of collecting, of preserving beauty that would otherwise be destroyed by public handling. And I'm not alone. There are collectors like me in every major city. We're preserving civilization itself. Foster's wire was transmitting everything. Her backup would be moving in. But Margaret seemed unconcerned. You can arrest me, Agent Foster. You can even convict me. But I'm 85 years old. I'll die before I serve any real time. And my collection? It's already being moved, shipped to locations you'll never find. The art will survive, even if I don't. The sound of sirens filled the air. FBI vehicles surrounded the mansion. David dropped his gun, knowing it was over. As Margaret was arrested, she said one last thing to Foster. "Ask Edmund about the real collection. Ask him what's really in his basement. You think I'm the villain, but he's been hiding the truth about this city's art world for 40 years." The raid on the Steinberg mansion recovered over 200 stolen artworks worth an estimated $2 billion. The forgery ring's exposure sent shockwaves through the art world. Dozens of museums discovered their collections contained forgeries. The scandal destroyed careers, bankrupted institutions, and led to the largest art crime investigation in history. David Steinberg was convicted of murder and conspiracy. Margaret Steinberg died of a heart attack before her trial, taking many secrets with her. But her final words haunted Foster. She returned to Thorne's shop one last time. "The real collection," she said. What was Margaret talking about? Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Then he led her to the basement, to another hidden door she'd never noticed. Behind it was a gallery that rivaled any museum. Hundreds of paintings, sculptures, artifacts, all pristine, all genuine. "These are the originals," Thorne said. "The real pieces that were replaced with forgeries. I've been recovering them for 40 years, buying them from criminals who didn't know what they had, trading information for art that was about to be destroyed. This is evidence of crimes. This is art saved from destruction. If I'd turned these in, they'd have been tied up in legal battles for decades, maybe destroyed as evidence. Here, they're preserved, protected. You're no better than Margaret. I'm different from Margaret. She hoarded art for power and profit. I preserve it for its own sake. When I die, all of this goes to the rightful museums, with full documentation of how they were saved." Foster faced an impossible decision. Arresting Thorne would mean losing the location of hundreds of stolen artworks, but letting him go meant accepting that sometimes justice and law weren't the same thing. "You have 1 year," she finally said. 1 year to return everything to its rightful place. After that, if a single piece is still here, I arrest you." Thorne nodded. 1 year. The year Foster gave Thorne passed quickly. True to his word, he began returning artworks to their rightful owners. But it wasn't a simple process. Each piece had to be authenticated, its provenance verified, and legal ownership established. The art world was still reeling from the Steinberg scandal, and no one wanted to be caught with stolen or forged pieces. Foster monitored the process, visiting the shop monthly to verify progress. Each time she found the hidden gallery a little emptier, but also discovered new layers to Thorne's operation. On one visit, she found him meeting with a representative from the Iraqi National Museum. These cuneiform tablets were looted during the 2003 invasion, Thorne explained to the representative. "They surfaced in New York's black market 5 years ago. I've been holding them, waiting for someone from your museum to claim them." The representative was in tears. "These are from the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal. We thought they were lost forever." After the meeting, Foster confronted Thorne. "How many other countries' artifacts do you have?" "Artifacts from 17 nations, all looted during wars or stolen from museums. I've been contacting cultural ministries, arranging returns. It's slow work. Many countries don't trust an American antique dealer claiming to have their treasures." "Why didn't you return them sooner?" "Because until the Steinberg scandal, no one would have believed me. Now, with museums questioning their entire collections, people are willing to listen." 3 months into the year, Foster received an unexpected visitor at FBI headquarters. William Ashford, the elderly collector she'd interviewed during the collector's investigation. "Agent Foster, I'm dying," he said bluntly. "Pancreatic cancer, 3 months, maybe 4. I need to clear my conscience." About what? About Edmund Thorne, about who he really is. Foster leaned forward. I'm listening. Thorne isn't just one person. It's a position, a role that's been passed down. The current Edmund Thorne is the third. I knew the first two. That's impossible. The shop's only been open since 1981. The shop, yes, but the role of curator, the real curator, goes back much further. To the 1920s, when wealthy collectors first started organizing to preserve art they believed was at risk. Ashford pulled out a photograph, old and yellowed. It showed a group of men in 1920s attire standing in what was clearly Thorne's basement. The Society of Preservation. They weren't criminals, not at first. They were collectors who believed that war, poverty, and ignorance were destroying the world's cultural heritage. They pooled resources to buy and protect artifacts. What changed? The Depression, World War II. Art became a commodity, then a weapon. Nazis looted Europe's museums. The Allies bombed cultural sites. The society realized that legal methods weren't enough. They needed someone who could operate in the shadows, someone who could deal with both criminals and legitimate collectors. Edmund Thorne. The first one, yes. Edwin Thornbury, actually. He ran the shop from 1924 to 1965. When he died, his apprentice took over, becoming the second Edmund Thorne. That one lasted until 1981, when the current Thorne took over. So the man I've been dealing with has been playing this role for over 40 years, but he's more than just a curator. He's a keeper of secrets, a broker of truth, a guardian of art that would otherwise be lost. You're part of this society? Ashford nodded weakly. Was. We disbanded officially in 1990, but some of us continued supporting Thorne's work. We funded his operations, provided connections, helped him navigate the legal system. That's conspiracy. Money laundering accessory to what? Saving art, returning stolen goods, exposing corruption? Yes, laws were broken, but look at the results. Thousands of pieces saved, returned, preserved. The Steinberg ring exposed. Your father's killers brought to justice. That stopped Foster cold. You knew about my father? Thorne told us. He'd been gathering evidence about police corruption for years, waiting for the right person to give it to. You were that person. He manipulated me. He guided you to the truth. There's a difference. Ashford left Foster with a box of documents, records of the Society of Preservation, lists of saved artworks, financial records showing how they'd funded Thorne's operations for decades. We weren't criminals, Ashford said as he left. We were preservationists. Sometimes preservation requires working outside the law. Foster spent weeks going through the documents. The scale was staggering. The society had saved over 10,000 pieces of art from destruction, theft, or loss. They'd operated in war zones, disaster areas, and criminal markets. They'd broken countless laws, but they'd preserved human culture. She confronted Thorne with the evidence. So, you're not even Edmund Thorne. I am now. I have been for 43 years. The man I was before doesn't matter. What was your real name? Robert Chen. I was a curator at the Brooklyn Museum. I was recruited by the second Thorne when I refused to authenticate a forgery. He saw someone who valued truth over convenience. And you gave up your entire identity? I traded it for a more important one. Robert Chen could save a few paintings. Edmund Thorne could save thousands. It's still illegal. Yes, but legal isn't always right, and illegal isn't always wrong. You know this. Your father knew this. That's why he died, because he chose right over legal. Foster couldn't argue with that. Her father had died trying to expose corruption. working outside official channels because the official channels were compromised. 6 months into the year, a new crisis emerged. The FBI received intelligence that a terrorist group was planning to destroy the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The threat was credible. The group had already destroyed cultural sites in Syria and Iraq. The museum was evacuated, security increased, but the intelligence was vague about the method of attack. That's when Thorne contacted Foster. "I know how they're going to do it," he said, "and I know when." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because they tried to buy explosives through the black market. My contacts alerted me. They're not planning an external attack. They have someone inside. A curator who's been radicalized." "Who?" "Dr. James Morrison. He's been with the Met for 5 years, specializing in Middle Eastern art. He converted to radical Islam 2 years ago, though he's hidden it well." "You have proof?" "I have his communications with the terror group. He's planning to destroy the museum's Islamic art collection, claiming it's blasphemous to display religious artifacts in a secular space." Foster's team arrested Morrison hours before he could execute his plan. They found explosives hidden throughout the Islamic art wing, enough to destroy the entire section and kill hundreds. Morrison confessed immediately, ranting about the sacrilege of displaying holy artifacts for entertainment. He'd been planning the attack for a year, slowly smuggling in explosives hidden in artifact crates. The arrest made Thorne a hero in the intelligence community. His network had prevented a major terrorist attack, but Foster knew it also made him untouchable. How could she arrest someone who just saved hundreds of lives? 9 months into the year, Thorne's hidden gallery was nearly empty. Only a few dozen pieces remained, the ones with the most complex provenance issues. "I need more time," Thorne said. "Some of these pieces have been stolen and resold so many times, finding the rightful owner is nearly impossible." "You have 3 more months. What happens after that, Agent Foster? Do you really arrest me? Destroy the network that saved the Met? That exposed the Steinberg ring? That brought your father's killers to justice? I follow the law. The law that protected your father's killers for 20 years? The law that let Margaret Steinberg operate for 40 years? That law?" Foster had no answer. The year had shown her how complicated Thorne's world was. He was a criminal, but he was also a protector. He broke laws, but he preserved culture. He dealt with thieves and murderers, but he also saved lives and art. 2 weeks before the year ended, Foster received a package at her apartment. Inside was a painting, a small portrait of a young girl, oil on canvas, clearly old. The note attached read, "This belonged to your grandmother. It was stolen from your family's home in Poland in 1942. The Nazis sold it, and it passed through many hands before reaching New York. I've been holding it for 20 years, waiting for the right time to return it. Consider it a reminder that not everything is black and white." E.T. Foster researched the painting. It was indeed her grandmother's, a portrait of her as a child painted by a local artist in Warsaw. Her family had thought it destroyed in the war. She brought the painting to Thorne's shop. "This doesn't change anything," she said. "I didn't expect it to, but I wanted you to understand what I do. I reunite people with their heritage, their history. Sometimes that requires working outside the law. The year is almost up. I know, and as promised, the gallery is nearly empty. The last pieces will be gone within the week. And then Edmund Thorne closes the shop and disappears. It's time. I'm 71 years old. I've been doing this for 43 years. The world has changed. Technology makes it harder to operate in shadows. It's time for Edmund Thorne to become a legend. A story people tell about the antique dealer who knew everyone's secrets. Where will you go? somewhere quiet. Maybe I'll write a book, fiction, of course. The true story of Edmund Thorne would be too unbelievable. The last week arrived. Foster visited the shop to find it being packed up. The hidden gallery was empty, the walls bare. Thorne was boxing up the legitimate antiques, preparing to close. "Every piece returned," he said, "as promised." "What about the shop's contents, the regular antiques?" "Being donated to various museums, except for a few pieces I'm keeping for sentimental reasons." Foster noticed one item set aside, the leather ledger she'd first seen, the one that had contained records of her father's death. "That's evidence," she said. "That's history," Thorne corrected, "and I'm its keeper. Without this ledger, the truth about dozens of crimes would be lost. I'll make sure it reaches the right people at the right time." "You're still planning to operate. I'm planning to preserve truth. Whether that's operating or simply existing, I'll leave to philosophers to decide." On the final day, Foster arrived to find the shop empty except for Thorne, sitting at his Victorian desk, writing in a new ledger. "The final entry," he said, "the end of Edmund Thorne's story. It's noon, your year is up. And I've kept my promise. Every stolen piece returned, the gallery empty, the criminals exposed or reformed. What more do you want? Justice. You have it. The corrupt cops who killed your father are in prison. The Steinberg forgery ring is destroyed. A terrorist attack was prevented. Thousands of artifacts are back with their rightful owners. If that's not justice, what is?" Foster sat across from him, the same positions they'd taken a year ago. "You're a criminal." "Yes. You've broken dozens of laws, hundreds, actually. You've profited from crime. I've redirected criminal profits toward preservation and justice. I should arrest you. Yes, you should." They sat in silence for a moment. "But you won't," Thorne said finally, "because you know that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. Your father knew it. That's why he was investigating outside official channels. You know it. That's why you made a deal with me instead of arresting me immediately. This isn't over. If you resurface, if you start operating again, I won't. Edmund Thorne is done. The shop is closed. The network is being disbanded. The Society of Preservation is truly dead now. Ashford was the last besides me, and he died last month. I'm sorry. Don't be. He died peacefully, knowing his life's work was complete. That's all any of us can hope for." Thorne stood, handed Foster the ledger he'd been writing in. "What's this?" "The true history of Edmund Thorne, all three of them. Every crime, every recovery, every secret. Consider it a confession, or a memoir, or evidence. Use it however you see fit." Foster took the ledger, feeling its weight, not just physical, but moral. "Why trust me with this?" "Because you're the only person who understands what Edmund Thorne really was. Not a criminal or a hero, but something in between. Someone who did wrong things for right reasons. Someone who saved beauty through ugly methods." Thorne put on his coat, picked up a single suitcase. "Goodbye, Agent Foster. Thank you for the year. It allowed me to finish properly, to close the circle." He walked out of the shop, leaving Foster alone in the empty space. She sat there for a long time, holding the ledger, thinking about everything that had happened. The shop was sold a month later, became a trendy coffee house. The new owners found nothing unusual about the space. The hidden rooms had been sealed, the basement filled in. It was just an empty building with good bones and a long history. Foster kept the ledger in a safe deposit box, along with the painting of her grandmother. She never opened an official case file on Edmund Thorne's final year. As far as the FBI was concerned, he'd disappeared after the Steinberg investigation. But sometimes late at night she'd read through the ledger. The stories of art saved, families reunited with their heritage, criminals convinced to abandon their crimes. It was a record of a different kind of justice, one that operated outside the law but served a higher purpose. 5 years later, Foster received a postcard from Florence. The pictures showed the Uffizi Gallery. On the back, in handwriting, she recognized, "The gallery here reminds me of our basement, full of beauty that someone saved from destruction. Thank you for understanding. Robert." She burned the postcard, but kept the memory. Edmund Thorne was gone, but his legacy lived on in every piece of art he'd saved, every family reunited with their heritage, every crime he'd helped solve. Foster never found out Robert Chen's new identity or location. She didn't try. Some secrets were worth keeping, some crimes worth forgiving, some criminals worth protecting. The antique shop on the corner of Greenwich Village was gone, but its story lived on in whispers among art dealers, criminals, and FBI agents. The legend of Edmund Thorne, the man who knew everyone's secrets and used them to save beauty from destruction. Foster retired early, haunted by the moral ambiguities of the Thorne case. In her final report, filed only in her personal records, she wrote, "Edmund Thorne was a criminal who prevented greater crimes, a thief who returned stolen goods, a liar who revealed truth. He operated outside the law but served justice. He broke rules but preserved culture. I should have arrested him. I'm glad I didn't." The shop remains a coffee house to this day. But sometimes, people say, if you know where to look, you can still see the outline of the hidden door in the basement wall. And sometimes, very rarely, someone will receive an anonymous package containing a piece of art they thought was lost forever, with a note that simply says, "From the collection of E.T." The legend lives on, a reminder that justice and law aren't always the same thing, that sometimes the greatest criminals are the ones who operate within the system, and that sometimes, just sometimes, a criminal can be a hero.